morning, everyone, or good afternoon, or good evening, depending upon where you are, meridian-wise around this rotating planetary sphere, hurtling through space at uncountless thousands of miles per hour and miles per second in many different directions simultaneously. Well, this morning on the other side of midnight, we're going to kind of continue the conversation that we had last night, which is, who the hell are we? What are we doing in this place? Who are our real ancestors? Who, in fact, among us may have origins that are not quite here? And I'll explain what I mean as we get into the conversation. Let me start out with a couple of items at the top here. Federal officials just have admitted they made a boo-boo. Apparently, a huge series of files were made public via the internet, the old internet, on Native American sites and artifacts. And the reason this is important is because we're going to be talking about Native Americans and Native American traditions and origins and bloodlines and connections and mythologies, which really are, in many cases, more like disguised history. We'll get into all that, but you know, they're saying it's an oops, and one kind of wonders, is it really an oops, or was this part of some other plan? Item number 2, again, you can see these if you want to click on them and read them in detail. Go to theothersideofmidnight.com, click on tonight's graphic for July 15th, Sunday night, with Michael Hill as my guest. Click on that graphic, and then that will take you to Michael's guest page. Scroll down to Radio with Pictures to My Items, which are right there close to the top. And item number 2, we're getting more intriguing, shall we say, leaks from inside NASA. Several astronauts now have kind of come forward in various ways and said things casually like, oh, we could have been on Mars 50 years ago. Or the reason we haven't gone back to the moon in the last 45 years is because money. It's only about money, which of course can be changed with the political wave of the wand. In other words, the people have to want to do these things. And there hasn't been much reason over the last 45, 50 years to want to do some of these things. And I have a feeling that's going to change. In fact, I have a feeling it's changing. And one of the changes may be taking place in Helsinki in a few hours. We will be watching that very carefully. And I'll explain what I mean by that in a minute. Later this year, Israel is planning to launch a spacecraft, an unmanned, roughly 1,300-pound spacecraft, which is the lightest spacecraft ever sent, to the moon. Unmanned mission to the moon by the Israelis, and they're going to leave in December, the end of this year, 2018, and they'll kind of lollygag around. I mean, that's kind of a flip way of saying it, but they're using a particular orbit which allows them to kind of get to the moon very, very slowly. Several other nations and missions to the moon have used this same orbital celestial mechanics to save fuel. And it's being launched on one of Elon Musk's Falcon 9 rockets, which technically really shouldn't be able to get stuff to the moon that can do anything. But in this case, because of the combination of ingenuity and the right trajectory, they will be landing. This is the Israelis now. They'll be landing their unmanned spacecraft on the moon on February 13th. And I've been looking and looking and thinking, why is that important? What's mythologically or ritually or ceremonially or important about that date? If there's anybody who knows some interesting Jewish history out there, send me a note through Discord or the Open Hailing Frequencies room and let me know. And it will be forwarded to me and I will read it on the air. But there's got to be something about February 13th, 2019. Now, the thing they're not telling us, which I find very intriguing, they're not telling us where they're going to land. If they know when they're going to land, to the day and the hour, why won't they tell us where? That'd be interesting. But let's kind of find someone to pursue that. Find out if there's something in Jewish history, in Jewish mythology, in Jewish tradition about February 13th. And item number 4, if you're scanning down my items, the Kremlin hopes that the Helsinki summit tomorrow, in a few hours, may pave the way for the president to visit Moscow. I mean, what's going on between Trump and Putin? And why? I mean, this is really weird. There's no real reason for these guys to physically meet. They talk on the phone. We know that. We don't have any notes, but we know they talk on the phone. And many times we find it out from the Russians before we find it out from, Sarah. But in this case, they want to meet first alone. And they're talking about that meeting, that single meeting where the two guys and two interpreters will be in a room alone for hours. What can you imagine that these two leaders could talk about alone with no one witnessing except for the translators for hours? Now, my suspicion is it has nothing to do with the Middle East. It has nothing to do with the EU, has nothing to do with NATO, has nothing to do with China or Korea or whatever. I think it's something so much bigger. In fact, I think it's kind of part of tonight's conversation with my guest. And as the morning progresses, we will explore some potential avenues of that potential connection. So without further ado, let me get to my main guest of the morning, my only guest of the morning. Michael Lee Hill is an award-winning musician, filmographer, and UFO experiencer. Throughout his life, Michael has experienced ET contact and happenings, including developing an intuitive relationship with the craft and those, of course, who are in the craft. In his home state of Ohio, we know who they are, began to communicate with Michael through telepathy at an early age. They revealed themselves in the physical as orbs of light or plasma over Lake Eerie much, much later, and allowed Michael to film them. For years, he's been cataloging video after video of the UFOs over Lake Eerie. When his footage went viral, which was, I think, 2008, we'll check that, gaining worldwide attention, he landed up on a primetime television show called UFO Hunters on the History Channel. The phenomenon consists almost entirely of pulsing orbs of light, unusual light seen changing colors, converging and separating over the lake. Stories of the unexplained phenomena date back over 150 years to the indigenous North American tribes who lived there then. And we're going to talk at some length about those tribes and their connections to the things we talked about last night. On one episode, UFO Hunters decided to test his blood. This is Michael now. And it was revealed that he does not have normal human blood. I have no idea what that means, but we're going to find out. UFO Hunters uncovered a very rare blood anomaly bloodline that the world's best military and civilian doctors are at a loss to explain. They suggest that somehow, some way, he could be a hybrid between ET and humans. Or put another way, apropos of last night, maybe he's just one of the family and the blood types are more common than we might think, but since nobody really is testing for them, who knows? Michael was then contacted by a branch of the government called the Labyrinth Group. We'll find out about that. And he discovered some startling revelations. Over the years, ETs began teaching Michael healing codes for life via crop circles, the codes in the crops. The sharing of this wisdom is the focus of his creative expression in film, in art, and in music. So without further ado, Michael Lee Hill, this is your life. No, actually, this is the other side of midnight. Welcome.
How you doing, Richard?
I'm doing great. I'm really looking forward to this conversation because last night we were exploring the idea that humans, or at least some Homo sapiens, really had their origins on a place not far away and visible in the pre-dawn skies now called Mars. And they were taken there, they matriculated, they developed multiple civilizations. And then when things got really, 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 really bad, they had to come back. They had to come home. They had to come to Earth. So your discussions about contact with ETs who are kind of speaking the same language, I don't find strange at all because the data is there to support an extraordinary origin for, I'm not saying everyone on Earth, but for a subset, a subgroup of humans on this planet. I think their or our, because I don't know whether I'm in the group or not, origins could be conceived to be off-world. So where do we begin? I think we probably should begin with your childhood. You grew up in Ohio. I lived in Indiana for a long time. Idyllic places, except in the summer when, the humidity is too high. What was it in your childhood that first made you realize that life's not exactly what we've been taught?
Well, from an early age, I would have these visits from what I could only process as a child as Santa Claus's elves. My mom said, I used to ask her, why is Santa Claus's elves coming to visit me? It's not Christmas. And none of these events, they weren't scary. I always imagined these elves as bringing gifts for me. And I would be summoned outside and they'd be waiting on top of like the roof of the balcony kind of deal, and they would hand me down a gift, and it was never scary or anything.
What kind of gifts?
It would be like a box, like an actual, like a Christmas gift. Really, it would be like a wrapped up box, and I don't.
When you opened it, what was inside?
I don't know. I don't remember ever. Yeah, I don't know if it's a screen memory for something else because I don't think that they really.
You didn't keep these?
I'm sure I did in one way or another, but I just thought I didn't know why Santa's elves were coming, and but in my 20s I started.
Let's not leave Santa's elves, okay? What did they look like?
They look like grays, tall grays. That's what I would call them now. Back then there was no such thing, but it's interesting because that's the last time I remember a contact with grays, and it was not scary because, later on it became a totally different. Well, we can get into this. I heard the Anunnaki work with the grays because the grays are truly one of the greatest geneticists in the bigger picture, and the data that they collect is available to all the different races. Okay,
well, let's not skip ahead. Roughly, how old were you when you had these contacts?
About 5, 6.
Okay.
Yeah, a lot of times it would be when my family and I were on vacation, and we'd be like in the woods in Virginia and things like that is when a lot of these visitations would occur.
How many in your family?
Right now, well, see, I was adopted, so I'm an only child with my parents that raised me. But because of the History Channel thing, I did reach out and I met my birth mother and my 2 half sisters, and that's when I found out about my Indian heritage, because that's another thing to get into. I didn't know at that time. And I found out I have a pretty famous biological father, and that's a little weird to talk about, but it is what it is. And Bill Burns featured it in his UFO Hunters book because I found out because they asked me to approach and find out who my adoptive parents was. Do you want to know who it is? And
yeah, sure, of course.
It's Eric Clapton. Isn't that crazy?
That is totally crazy. Okay.
Yeah, I can tell you it's true too. But
so you know this from DNA testing?
No DNA testing. It's from now meeting my birth mother and things that she's told me that has turned out to be absolutely accurate, and especially about. It's a deep subject, Hey,
we have 3 hours.
Yeah, right on. The whole story of what happened is very much a part of what I've learned is how things truly are working with secret society.
Then we need to know more to understand. So, yeah, get into it if you want to.
Man, this gets weird because it's like
this is the other side of midnight. Nothing on the other side of midnight is either paranormal or weird. Remember, if it happens, it's real.
For instance, I started to find out. She said that that Eric knew that he wasn't of a normal bloodline, and told her as much, and said that if pretty much they were angelic, and that he knew the whole planet was being lied to for some reason and not told the truth. And he had a guardian, as far as, being raised into this family. And this guardian was not a nice person. And
this is a human guardian here on Earth, right?
Yes. He was brought up right in the middle of Team Bad Cop, and fought back growing up. She was made to participate in like Eyes Wide Shut kind of sexual things. This is what people. And the truth of the matter is, it was almost being like set up from higher levels, because the two bloodlines is Erie Montauk, which the Erie Indians used to be in the New York area, but you'll find out they became the Seminole. No one knows that from Florida, but they moved out of the New York area and went into Florida, and there's a whole piece of missing history that I'd be more than happy to share. But that bloodline, which is a mound builder, Native American Indian bloodline, and Robbie Robertson is part of the same bloodline as well from the band. And you find out Eric produced his album where he went back to his Native American roots. I think it was 2014, and they both worked together. Eric played on a couple songs. They're both very a part of that family. And as you know what, nothing's just black and white. There's a lot of good people in dark places, and they become whistleblowers. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. It's like there's light and dark in everything, and he didn't like what they were doing to him, and so it's a weird.
When you say he, you mean Clapton?
Yes, and they threw a monkey wrench in because I guess he had and I know this is some weird shit. I never really get into this, but he had some like childhood issues of like gnomes and trolls, and so the Illuminati, as the story goes and as it was told to me, and I believe it, they would make him participate in these like Eyes Wide Shut kind of stuff, but they would have him drugged out of his mind and having sex with like prostitutes they had drugged to the point of death, and they'd put a troll mask over these girls. Some of them, it was really horrible shit that was going on. And make a long story short, me and my mother, which is Iroquois. So what I want to tell you is, the Serpent Clan of the Native American Indians, the Dragons, there's both light and dark factions. The light comes through the Iroquois Seneca. The Erie Montauk reflected a negative polarity. So you can imagine the chance of having a individual born that had both bloodlines of good cop, bad cop, Nephilim, Anunnaki, human hybrid bloodline in one person would be slim to none. It's kind of like Romeo and Juliet, These tribes were at war with one another for almost all of our history. So they knew this certain individual they were wanting to return. They would know who he was of their bloodline because he would have both bloodlines running through their veins. Well, as it turns out, that's me, through Eric's bloodline, and they became Celtic. They went very long ago. Instead of Erie-ish, they became known as the Irie-ish and the Irish. And you find a lot of similarities between their culture and the Native American Indian mound builder culture. But anyhow, so you can see from higher up, there was a total mixture going on, which he told her, because what they had done is they threw a monkey wrench in my mother's relationship with him and said, "You're just a dancer. He's going to become Eric Clapton's solo star," because he was in Cream at that time. And they took my mother without Eric knowing and put a troll mask on her and drugged her out of her mind and brought Eric in to participate in these weird ritual things. And at one point they pulled the mask off, and Eric was, "Oh my God, this is my love." And, my birth mother was like, "Oh my God, how could you do this to me?" So it came to the point where he said, "Listen, if you'll go with me to England, I don't care what they do to us. We'll go with the child." and we'll face whatever happens. But if you don't want to do that and you can't forgive me and don't believe that I had no idea what was happening, you have to let me know right now. And if not, you need to give up the baby, because the baby will never be safe. Or you or nor the baby will never be safe if it's known what happens. So here I am, you know.
So she came to the United States, or came back to the United States.
Yeah, she was Iroquois. She was never English. She lives in Pennsylvania right now, and you'll find out around the Kinzu Dam, there was a large Iroquois settlement. A lot of people there. Matter of fact, it was in the 50s that a lot of, like, hundreds of them got relocated up into New York, and Johnny Cash was very into trying to be a voice of truth for them, and did some nice documentaries on that. But anyhow, that's where my great-great-grandmother, who was pureblood Seneca, and so that's why my birth mother from the Iroquois Seneca was now living in Pennsylvania. Well, when Cream came to America to tour, they went through Pennsylvania quite a lot, and they played a place called Sailors and Soldiers Hall. And during that, my birth mother was a go-go dancer, and she got the gig to go and go-go dance for Cream, and her and Eric hit it off, and I was their offspring.
So that's when they first met.
Yes.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Well, the reason this is so interesting is because by separate lines of research, totally separate, this ET off-world relationship, you know, family, cousins, whatever, is definitely coming to the fore. I mean, this is not really outrageous at all. What is outrageous is the idea that there is, at some level, some hyperdimensional level, there's ritual magic going on to affect some end, some objective. When you say, like, eyes wide shut rituals, do you know the objectives for these rituals?
I do not, but you know, I do now. I was asked to attend what is the Native American Indian most sacred ceremony spiritually that they have, and it's called the Sun Dance. And that's when I was taken before, you know, this is a 4-day festival, and it's called a sun dance because these sun dancers are going to go in and they are going to march and keep their feet going, staring at the sun for 4 days straight. No food, no water. I didn't even know that was possible, but they do it. But as they do this, as a show of support for, you know, it's truly giving your power away to an illusionary outside source. But sooner or later, if this guy that is supposed to be in charge of being in contact with, in quotes, spirit, says that person needs pierced, well, they get these huge needles that are like the size of like small cigars.
Good grief.
Pushed through their flesh, and they get attached to a tree, and they got.
It sounds like some kind of crucifixion ritual.
It is. As a matter of fact, when all this broke, and I didn't, because you're being tested by spirit at this point, and when I pretty much I wouldn't participate in their flesh and blood sacrifice ceremony, period. And at that point, the chief, the Sundance chief, who was sitting next to me, said, "Michael, we're so glad that you did not participate. That spirit looks upon anyone who participates in these flesh and blood sacrifice blood ceremonies as prostitute." And he pointed out to the sun dancers, and he said, "This is all about self-inflicted suffering brought about through one's own free will." He said, when you invoke your I am and step into your sovereignty, it's like, he said, so here's what happened, how he revealed himself that he's Yahweh. I mean, I didn't even know this stuff was real. he said, Michael, I work with the 7 Lords of Light and the 7 Lords of Darkness. I'm the only one who sits in the middle of those 2 sides. And I am the only one who holds a seat on both light and dark sides. And so after this meeting, we've known each other so long now. Man, I'm going to be skipping too far ahead here, but I was in the truck with him recently, and because Spirit now had led me to the information that the name Yahweh was known to the Native American Indians, both the Cherokee and the Iroquois, long before the First Testament of the Bible. And a matter of fact, this is just fact, that the first oldest 10 Commandments ever found written in ancient Hebrew was found in Ohio in the Newark Earthworks. They're in a museum right now. And the first menorah was here as well. This is where the Sangreal bloodline went to, is America, long before. And I know, see, I'm not even religious in these ways, but this is, there's DNA proof now that comes in the form of, it's called haplogroup X2A. And it was only found in 1998. That's not that long ago to find a brand new bloodline, a DNA bloodline. And what it was is haplogroup X2A throws all the history books upside down, because it only exists 3 places on this planet right now. One is the Native American Indian tribes, mostly the Iroquois, and it is at least 3%. Could be much higher, but a lot of Native Americans haven't had their blood work done. It's that simple. But when you go back in time, you'll find that haplogroup X2A is the bloodline of the giants, these tall skeletal remains that have been removed out of these earth mounds. And this is an interesting talking point in itself, because I am haplogroup X2A. So at one point, there's no doubt about it, we had giant stature. Now, we're not. The genetic work doesn't seem to be done. But anyhow, when you keep going back in time, where you find the largest concentration of haplogroup X2A, which would tell you, well, this is where it came from. It's the hills of Galilee. This is the Holy Grail Sangreal bloodline that the Templars brought back to America. So I asked him, because I found out that the name Yahweh was known to the natives long before the Bible. And we were in the truck, I looked him eye to eye, and he was the Sundance chief that revealed all this to me. There's a lot more to that story, believe me. But I said, I know this sounds weird and not to be really blunt, but Spirit has led me to the realization that you are Yahweh, Enlil, my brother. And he said, yes, I've done some pretty messed up things. That was his first words to me. And I said, well, haven't we all? And he said, but no one knows who Yahweh or Enlil is anymore anyhow, so I just go by chief. And this individual has already been on Ancient Aliens. He's one of the most prominent chiefs of the Native American Indian tribes as it is. That's an interesting story in itself, because you can imagine I never knew of my Indian heritage.
Well, I'll tell you what, let us stop here. We're at the bottom of the hour. My guest this morning is Michael Lee Hill, who, as you can now tell, is going to be a very interesting conversation for the rest of the morning. We're going to loop back and pick things up when he was a child, kind of a dawning awareness of things that would come true later. You're on the other side of midnight. My name is Richard C. Hoagland, and we shall return. You're listening to the first hour of The Other Side of Midnight. Be sure to catch our complete live show every Saturday and Sunday night at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern,
for a full 3 hours of this kind of exploration. And be sure to visit theothersideofmidnight.com as you listen so you can follow our special Radio with Pictures guest page simultaneously. That Cynthia, our hardworking producer, specifically prepares to illustrate the topics discussed each show. Why? Because there is vital additional information on that Radio with Pictures guest page that I assure you will immeasurably enhance your understanding and enjoyment of what our guests are describing. I mean, would you rather listen to a guest talk about NASA images of ancient artifacts on Mars, or simultaneously be able to follow the official NASA images showing you, as you're listening, the ruins? If you'd like to listen at your convenience to all our shows, including our unique Radio with Pictures feature, please visit theothersideofmidnight.com and click on the Join Club 19.5 link in the left-hand column. Okay, what do you get with your Club 19.5 membership, besides helping the show literally stay on the air? Well, first of all, you will exclusively, this is not available to the general public, enjoy our enhanced ad-free podcast, courtesy of Chris Bell, automatically downloading all the latest The Other Side of Midnight shows directly to your favorite podcast device so you can listen when you want to. Further, as a full Club 19.5 member, you will gain exclusive access to our The Other Side of Midnight 24/7 chat server, what I can't help calling the Open Hailing Frequencies room, which is available only to members 24/7. Now, during the show, that's where you will find other 19.5 members and sometimes even members of the bridge crew, my guests, and even me when I have time. Regardless, you can always relay live questions to me during the show just by going to the Open Hailing Frequencies room. Of course, when we're not on the air with your 19.5 membership, you can visit our Club 19.5 radio archives anytime and download all our shows directly to your computer, which will automatically provide you a screen size that allows you to really examine the remarkable images Cynthia posts for each show. Okay, here's where I need to get kind of super serious. Club 19.5 is how our show is currently solely supported, in my hopefully not vain attempt to keep commercials to a minimum. If you're concerned about keeping us on the air, if you want to hear information that has been vetted far more than perhaps any other show, the best way to ensure that is to join Club 19.5 and get your friends and family to join too. And if you don't know already, when I drop by Open Hailing Frequencies, you can even ask me directly what the ultimate meaning is behind 19.5. Literally, the most exclusive club in the world. Please join me and my interesting guests on this very stream every Saturday and Sunday night at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, and be sure to come back and listen to our live 3-hour shows. Thanks for listening, and now, back to the show.
And welcome back on this Sunday night on the other side of midnight. My guest this morning is Michael Lee Hill, and he's kind of started us off in a very interesting direction because it turns out, and this was jogging my memory, so during the break I actually looked it up, the Iroquois played a very crucial role in the formation and foundation of the Constitution of the United States. And since we already know from other data that the United States is formed to do something really, really, really important coming up in not too distant future, this is kind of coming together in an interesting way. And what I find intriguing, Michael, is that you've got light and dark embodied in the same group. And my question then is, what is the conflict between the light and the dark? What are they warring over? Is it us? Is it Homo Sapiens on the planet? Is it the future of Earth?
It was implemented a very long time ago because when, they came, I guess, you need to kind of know who the Anunnaki are, but, as the story goes.
No, wait. You keep throwing that term around, Anunnaki. There may be some people in the audience who don't know who the Anunnaki are, which is a term that comes from the Middle East, has nothing overtly to do with Native Americans. So how are you mixing your metaphors? How do the Iroquois, the Seneca, the Erie, the Seminoles, how do they fit into an Anunnaki paradigm? So start out by explaining who the Anunnaki are.
Right on. The Anunnaki are said, and this is in actual Sumer, pre-Egypt, Sumerian clay tablets that have now started to become decoded, but there's still thousands upon thousands of tablets that haven't even been decoded yet. But people might know back in Sumer, pre-Egypt, that mankind came out of the gate pretty much with full functioning culture, with art and music and math. And actually, it's interesting, our method of timekeeping was given to us back then as well. And mathematically, this idea of dividing a whole unit by 12, whether it's 12 inches in a foot, 12 hours in a day, and right there, how they encoded time. Look at how many seconds is in 12 hours. It's 43,200. So even right out of the bat, they've been trying to guide us into these cosmic harmonious frequencies and drip feeding us, waiting for us to awaken to this information. So I think it's so important what we're doing right now.
Okay, but, hang on. That's the good guys. What are the bad guys trying to do?
Well, because at one point, the Anunnaki scientists found out that there was going to be what Charles Hapgood called a pole shift. He wrote a book called The Path of the Pole. No, maybe that was the
name of it. Yes.
Right on. And Albert Einstein wrote the preface, and he said, "Yeah, it's just physics. When the ice caps reach maturity, they're going to want to relocate to the equator, and it pulls the crust with it, and it's not really survivable on the surface."
Well,
so back then,
hang on. That was their model of what causes it. I agree with what they have written, but I don't think that's the cause. The cause is back to the physics that are part of these numbers we're going to talk about at great length.
That makes a lot of sense to me.
Well, think of it, you're a musician. Think of it as harmonious chords and then discords. Or if you really want to get eerie and, get the pucker factor going across the planet, think of fingernails on a blackboard. The physics wants to be rhythmic. If there's discord, if there's dissonance, if there are unharmonious frequencies that louse up the even frequencies, that's when bad things happen in the physics and happen to planets and stars and galaxies and whatever. It's all about harmony or discord, ultimately in the frequencies of the physics.
Makes total sense, because you start to find out that everything's light and sound in this physical reality, and sound. Well, what sound? It is 432. It's interesting because we can get into this with the E = MC squared. 432.
Okay, before we do that, I want to go back and try to be linear. We left you at 5, meeting with a whole bunch of little guys who were your friends, who you think of as akin to the Greys, and they gave you gifts, and you can't remember, and you didn't save any of the gifts, which I find really interesting, because that says symbolism. Okay, and then you, obviously, all of us do. You grew. What did you do from childhood, meeting extraterrestrials, to where you became a conscious adult, wondering what the hell am I doing in this place?
Well, I went the 3D route. I became a manager, and I tried to be a grown-up and do what was expected of me. And I got rid of all my guitars down to one guitar and a small practice amp.
So, you started out being a musician.
Yes.
You really resonated, pun intended, definitely intended, with music. So growing up, you were playing music, you were doing band stuff, you were recording, to talk about your musical life, because I had a section of my life that was music, and I would not give it away for an instant. So
right on. I was suckered into the whole idea of you got to be a grown up, and people were like, you'll never make a living doing music or anything. And I worked for a company that made dollar bill acceptors for gaming, like slot machines, where you go up, you put your dollar in, it sucks it in. That's the company I work for. And vending, like Coca-Cola machines or whatever. So I had helped them get a postal contract service. I worked there for 20 years and got into.
You helped them, meaning what? The company?
Yeah, because the postal service ended up getting a stamp machine that had our dollar bill acceptor in it in all the post offices in the United States. So you can imagine.
I remember those. Yes.
Yeah. There was a $35 million contract. And it was weird because at this time in my life, I'd worked there for 20 years and really worked my way into a high paying position. And I was working as the head quality assurance guy for the whole line. Like, obviously we made dollar bill acceptors for the whole world. So every note, every currency has its own magnetic signature, and it's a lot of work. And I would make sure that you couldn't rip off the machines. That was my job. So, but simultaneously in the late 1990s.
So that you couldn't do what that kid did in Terminator, what was it, Terminator 2?
What part was that?
Where he stuck the card in with the laptop connected with a cable, and he was able to punch out the numbers with using the laptop and the card.
Oh yeah, no, I'm the reason that you can't do those things. But the problem is,
I said, yeah.
If I've never done it, but I knew every way to rip off every machine that's ever been made, But a weird thing happened because in my life, my aunt was going through a divorce and went and stayed with my parents. And the new husband, when he found out, he went to my parents' house and shot and killed her. And it caused me to hit a mental wall. Like, I was like, man.
This is in your 20s.
It would have been 1990s. So I was, late 20s, somewhere in there. I really made a plea to the universe. I was like, if there's anyone out there or in here, you need to speak up, And instead of answering that call, what happened was they just gave me an unquenchable thirst for knowledge. And I started being guided to certain beds of information, yourself included. There was a store that sold records and DVD, there was no DVDs at that time, VHS tape collections and stuff. And this was a record store. And I'd go back there and go through the science section, the science fiction, UFOs, whatever. And a lot of your presentations were there. And I was just enamored and just went through them all with a fine-tooth comb. So thank you for being part of my life for this long.
Thank you for listening.
Oh yeah, it's you've opened my eyes to a bigger reality, and it's very interesting to me that it is about multidimensional, hyperdimensional physics, because that's what this all comes down to, and how really energy works in the universe, and aligning oneself with it, and what's possible.
See, this gets back to my question. You got good guys and bad guys.
Mm-hmm.
We know what the good guys are trying to do. All right. But what are the bad guys trying to do? And what do they get by keeping the rest of us down on the farm?
This goes all the way back to the pole shift thing in the story of the Anunnaki, because as the story goes, this individual, his name was Inki. He was not a pureblood. He was the firstborn of the king of their world named Nibiru. Now, I'll just tell you that they said that's our name for them, that they call their planet the Sa'ami. And the people of the Sa'ami are the Sa'am, and the Sa'am translated into the Western culture is Sam, S-A-M. And when you deal, because we can talk about this in a while, but I got
wait. You mean like Uncle Sam?
Yeah, right.
Think about that.
Yeah.
The United States was formed on the foundation of an Iroquois confederation.
So glad you brought that up.
And ultimately, we wind up with a totem called Uncle Sam. And this all goes back to ancient humans off planet that derive from a planet called Sa'am. It begins to, there's kind of a trend here, don't you think?
It's all connected more so than people know, because truly you find out it was our forefathers, Benjamin Franklin and Thomas Jefferson, and there's another guy that early on went to the Seneca because you got to remember, coming from Europe, it wasn't we the people. You know what I mean? This was a system of governance that they learned from the Iroquois, because what you find out is the Iroquois, for a long time in their history, were not united. Right now, they're a confederacy, and they've been at peace with one another for a very long time. And but what had happened was, when the European settlers started to come in, some of the Iroquois wanted to partner with the European incoming, and not only did they start warring amongst themselves, but they were warring internally and within themselves in even darkness. So one of them, his name was Hiawatha. A lot of people know the name, but they don't know the actual story, because what I'm telling you is how the Iroquois became unified and later on went to become the forefathers of the United States of America. America means land of the serpents, by the way. Isn't that interesting?
Isn't that interesting? Yes, of course.
Yeah, because truly...
not named after Amerigo Vespucci, the map maker, et cetera, et cetera.
No, what happened is, this gets into Team Good Cop and Team Bad Cop, because 27,000 years ago, the Anunnaki was not ruled by the firstborn, Ea Enki. They were led by... What you need to know is Enki, Ea, was not a full-blood Anunnaki himself. He was half Pleiadian. His mother was the Pleiadian queen who was married to the Anunnaki king. Their first son was a hybrid himself. So longer down the timeline, this Anunnaki king, or the king of the Sam, severs that relationship and takes on an Anunnaki female, and they have another child who becomes known as Enlil, or Ea. That's the brothers, is Ea and Enlil. Enlil became known as Jehovah. And because of their succession of kingship, rules of their culture, and as a lot of Earth, a pure blood's going to get the throne over a half-blood. So as it said, there's a whole reason. They've actually given me the whole story of why this happened and everything. But
okay, hang on. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's go back. You have this personal crisis, a murder in your family. It sets you off in a direction to look to, what the hell am I doing here? There's got to be more than this. Yeah. You find a whole bunch of people, including me, talking about big picture stuff, origins of all of us and all that. What happens next?
I was guided to what just really opened my head up to some things was I was led to a bed of spiritual information called the Seth material that was channeled by a lady named Jane Roberts. And it was like my asking of the universe for answers came. And I was pretty much, I would go to work and I would just open up my Seth book at break and read it for 15 minutes and then put it down. Well, pretty soon I went through everything, and it was really hard for me to start to understand that whole law of attraction, that your mental energy is affecting your reality kind of bed of information. But sooner or later, I broke through and I kind of started to understand it. But I thought, well, I don't need to read any more books. I need to try to start applying this stuff in my life. And so through meditation and stuff, I started being guided that, if you step out of your job this whole life, you'll meet who you need to meet. The doors will open effortlessly, but no one can do it for you. You got to conquer that fear.
So you had to make the first step, the first real step in change.
Yes. So I did. I put myself on the layoff list, which was very difficult. I had a house, I had a car, but I'd like to tell people, if you truly think that you're in contact with something higher and it tells you to do something, if you don't listen, that's probably the stupidest thing you could do,
Well, there's also, if a random stranger came up to you and said, you got to sell everything and give it to me, would you? No, of course not.
No. So it's got to come through supernatural.
How do you test internally whether what you're hearing and feeling is right or you're being misled?
Yeah, it definitely. You got to become very a connoisseur of resonance, right? Things that are of truth have a resonance, and you can tune yourself to tune in, But what happened was they ended up letting me go, which was weird because at first
meaning the company.
The company, right? Yeah. I put myself on the layoff list, and the president called me in and said, I decide who gets laid off, and you're not getting laid off. So I'm thinking, well, this creating your reality stuff isn't working real well, you know? So I'm thinking, well, what the hell do I do? And I didn't know what to do. So for 1 week, I just drove to the park. And I didn't call in. I just went to the park and meditated. I had one of the most unbelievable experiences with deer, by the way, which has been ongoing. But
Tell us.
Deer have actually, you'll find out that Inky's oldest, they're called the Serpent Clan, but the Stag Clan is actually, they're represented by a giant deer standing up on its back legs, by the way. And it's a symbol of the Inky bloodline here on the planet, but we can get back into that.
Well, before we get further, let me just ask you this question. In terms of animal totems, what do the totems mean? Do animals have personas as groups, or are there individuals? Or, I mean, for instance, the bald eagle, which is the national symbol, is an extraordinarily important symbol, reaching all the way to Lyra. We now find out from my friend Chris Knowles. So, what do animal totems, the Native American pantheon, mean?
It's actually the Enlil's bloodline is the eagle, and to the Native American Indians, eagle status is very important to them. It's like Christ consciousness, but they wouldn't call it Christ consciousness, obviously. But the eagle is the only bird that when trouble comes, it flies above the storm. It doesn't seek shelter underneath of it, and it's got the bird's eye view of everything. So when you reach eagle status, that's to them, it's the stat. What I found out is because I was given my spiritual Native Indian name by Chief Golden Light Eagle and the Dakota tribe that I was brought under their wing, and it's Rainbow Warrior Eagle. And so they told me specifically what those things mean. And it's really interesting because a grandmother came up to me afterwards and she said,
rainbows are good, frequencies.
Well, it has everything to do with frequency. She said, you are the rainbow we've been waiting for.
Oh, my God. Okay, let's go back to the park and your encounter with the deer, because we're coming up on the break at the top of the hour.
Yeah, I was sitting there just wondering what the hell was going on. So you're basically
trying to get fired is what you're doing.
Yeah. Or just see, like, after a week, I'm like, I don't know what else to do. I'm going to have to go back and just talk to the president again. But while I was at the park, a whole family of deer came out next to me within, I could have reached out and petted them as they walked by. I was just sitting on a swing in the middle of the park by myself. But when I went in, I said, listen, I've helped this company. All I'm asking is you do what you've done to everyone else. I need laid off. I need the money. I need the unemployment. I got a house. And he said, listen, if you'll stay to the last wave, we'll give you a nice severance package and everything. And I said, thank you so much. So all of a sudden, I didn't have a job, and it was a really good feeling, actually, because up until that point, I could project in the future and go, I'm going to be 60. I'm going to be making X amount of money at that time and have a nice house and stuff. But it seemed boring to me.
So this is like being reborn, and it's like, what do you do with the rest of your life?
Yeah. And I'll tell you, 5 months went by and no magical doors open. No one, no
patience, prudence, patience.
It was, that voice of, I've screwed up. That self-doubt, it started speaking loudly. And what had happened was, in about the 5th month, I had the most lucid vision in it. And in this vision, I was led down a corridor and it emptied out.
When you say vision, are we talking about wide awake vision or?
No, this was deep sleep at night. But it was lucid, and I have these dreams sometimes that are very prophetic, which you'll see, and they have a different quality to them, and this is one of them. And I was led down this corridor, and when we entered the hall, there was this musician who is just a huge inspiration to me. He's a Grammy Award winner. His name's Steve Vai. I don't know if you're familiar with the musician.
No, unfortunately, no.
He played for Frank Zappa.
Okay.
Yeah, 7 years as he was his head transcriber of music. Plus, he was given the job of impossible guitar parts by Frank Zappa. But when David Lee Roth quit Van Halen, he got Steve Vai to play for him. So he's that level of cat, So in it, I'm led down this corridor, and here's Steve Vai in there, and he's playing this song. I remember it was very spiritual, and it's called "There's a Train That's Leaving," and he kind of levitated over to where I was at, and all of a sudden there's this big crescendo in the music, and it stops, and there's dead silence. And he goes, "Welcome aboard." But when he said "welcome aboard," it was like in that movie God voice, you know, and it really woke me up out of the dream. I was like, "What the heck was that about?" You know, and I got this what I call a WTF drawer in my brain, and I just goes in there a lot of stuff. And the next day, I was like, something was just bugging me. I'm like, man, I feel like there's a synchronicity waiting for me at his website. I thought, wouldn't it be weird if he's working on a song called "There's a Train That's Leaving"? And so I went there, and right when I logged onto his website, I seen this banner. It said, "Enter the Steve Vai Ibanez Guitar Challenge," and the fur on the back of my neck went up. I knew I was going to win that contest. I hadn't even played a note on my guitar. I was just so sure I was going to win it because I just met him in this lucid vision state, and he said, "Welcome aboard." Well, as it turns out, I did end up winning this contest.
Oh my God.
Got flown to meet him, you know. It was like so surreal to me. And it was funny
about signs. I mean, come on, that was a huge arrow pointing you in the right direction.
Yeah, it was truly a breath of fresh air, you know, because from that point forward, that was in 2001. You know, there was a lot of time passed before the middle of 2005 when I started really having this full-on contact. So it was still a lot of time of kind of coming up out of that old system and trying to acclimate, you know. What's that called when you come up from deep depths? You got to reacclimate, you know.
Yeah, it's called, you don't want to do it all at once because you'll get the bends and it will kill you.
Yeah. You don't want.
It's called decompression.
Yes, spiritual bends. I like that. But so that started opening up like a heaven on earth to me but for a very long time, it's like as good as it got, and dreams, like not only meeting Steve Vai, but there's a musician named Joe Satriani, and he's a famous guitar player as well, and another huge inspiration. Well, I was flown to it's called a G3 concert, and both of them play at this concert. So I was like, oh my God, I'm going to get to meet Joe Satriani as well. So ended up, he offered me a guitar endorsement deal. He liked my music as well. I've went on to meet so many of my musical heroes. And by the way, I just work with Grant Cameron because he just wrote a book on how many musicians have had contact. And it's pretty staggering, but that's a whole nother.
Oh my God, then we should have you guys on together.
That would be fantastic.
Yeah, because I've known Grant for years and years. And I've tried to get him on a few months ago, and he was doing something. Now I know what he was doing. Okay, so
right on. You know what? He walked me through. He's going to be including a new book on and getting into the messages of what was given. He said, "Explain this 432 stuff to me like I'm a kindergartner." You know, so I walked through everything that I know. I love Grant, and yeah, it'd be an honor to do the show with him. With this subject matter.
Kintia, obviously she's paying attention. We should try to book these guys together in a month or so. See what Grant's schedule is, because to me, if he's doing the same kind of real high-level research that he did with the presidential aspect of ETs and ufology, if he's doing it with Native Americans, it's obviously a book and research we need to pay attention to.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. You know what? It's coming to the forefront very soon. Like I said, I just met Graham Hancock at the Serpent Mound, and it's because of his work into what this bloodline is. And so, yeah, I told him, I said, Graham, I feel like you're the cavalry showing up to, you know, communicate this story.
We're at the top of the hour. My guest this morning, Michael Lee Hill. Boy, do we have stuff to talk about. You're on the other side of midnight. My name is Richard C. Hoagland, and we shall return. want to say a couple words here about our club, Club 19.5. As you know, if you are a regular listener, this is how you can listen anytime, 24/7, to all the past shows that you missed because you were working or you were going to the movies or you had a hot date or whatever. And you can listen anywhere in the world on these little handheld gadgets now, smartphones. Gosh, you can take us anywhere. Now, the other night I was going through some music and I found something. I played it last time. I'm going to play it again tonight from our friend Bobby Bright, who has written an amazing theme song. We're going to play that in the third hour. But I want to play you something that he recorded that I literally had overlooked. And it's so cool. So without further ado, let me do that. Okay. Take a listen.
If you're in the hyperdimensional, one thing you'll find is essential is our club 19.5. It's a hyperdimensional storage case, a treasure trove of outer space. Our club 19.5. All the data we've accumulated, you'll find here, titled and collated. Why don't you just drop on by and give our club a try? If you're in the hyperdimensional, you'll find our credentials are fine. Club 19.5.
And welcome back on this Sunday night, July 15th, one day before the big meeting between Trump and Putin in a dark, sealed room with only two other human beings. What are they going to talk about for an hour, 2 hours, all by themselves? I have a feeling it's bigger than the mainstream seems to think. And I have a feeling that whatever it is, it's also going to leak. So we'll find out. My guest this morning, Michael Lee Hill. Michael, where should we should probably go back to this epiphany you had. You finally connected with a musician that you were supposed to, that you were toggled in a dream. And then at some point you started looking at stuff going on over Lake Eerie. Why don't we get to that? Because that's where things, I think, really take off.
Right on. Let me, before I do that, in a nutshell, because you asked me a question, I'm trying to wrap my head around the most concise way. What's the dark doing here? Because they crucial. They're doing their thing, and what it is they understand. I'm talking they is the Anunnaki, that thoughts have an electromagnetic reality, that thoughts have energy, and energy can't be created or destroyed. It needs to be transmuted. So if you think about, Dr. Emoto, I'm sure you know about his work, will show you that, frequencies that are aligned with evolution create geometry, snowflakes. Thoughts that are not with evolution, not so much geometry. It looks like a puddle, So if you take the idea that fear and love, in Dr. Emoto's work, he shows that thoughts which are not part of this physical system are affecting physical water. On the other end, you find out that frequency alone in water creates geometry. So it shows you thought forms have energy, and when you mix the two beds of science together. So the Anunnaki are like, well, how do you transmute a negative thought form? Because it was decided by the Pleiadians trying to help humanity evolve as fast as possible, that in the Sumerian telling, mankind was brought into, their word for it was Eden. And it was a very Edenic life for mankind at that point, even though people will say that we were created as slave labor. It's more like pampered pets. I hate to say it that way, but and there was no homeless, there was no starvation. If you went to the pyramid, you'd meet the 16-foot tall Anunnaki sitting on the chair in front of you, and it wasn't an issue. But because they knew this pole shift was going to happen, they said, well, what are we going to do with the 400 million? As the story goes, Enlil had the throne at that point, and he didn't look at mankind very well anyhow. And he thought, well, they're always going to never step up into their I am. They're always going to accept that dark carrot and abuse others and not abuse themselves. He said it's all about self-inflicted suffering through one's own free will. That was Chief Yahweh's own words to me. So to get to this, they decided to help mankind, let's put all of mankind into this experiment granted from higher levels, because the Pleiadians looked forward and said, oh my God, the end of this grand cycle is 2016. And because mankind has not had a catalyst for change, we were stagnant in our evolution. And they knew that if you evolve technologically without growing spiritually, it's not a good combo. And they didn't think mankind had the time to transmute all of its shadow work collective, that we would evolve technologically way faster and then destroy ourselves in 99 out of 100 endings of this timeline. Mm-hmm. So they came up with the idea of the Ark, and this is because Enki went against this whole race.
So wait. We're talking thousands of years ago as a projection of future history based on the resonances in the physics.
Yes, and the Pleiadian ability to time travel, to see future possible realities and whatnot. So they said, well, this Ark.
Just to make sure everybody is on the same page, Pleiadians are another faction of the human family just off-world. They happen to hang out in a place called the Pleiades, 420 light years away, and I forget which star system, but that's where they are.
Yes. So that's one thing that people need to know is the Anunnaki have two totally different bloodlines running through it. You have the Anunnaki Pleiadian side running through the Enki Ea bloodline, and then on the Enlil Yahweh line is pure blood Anunnaki. So anyhow, they said this idea of this DNA library, the Ark, to save mankind of this is really interesting, because Enki wouldn't go along with their plans. And as the story goes in the Sumerian clay tablets, he went to his mother's side and said, isn't there anything that can be done? My race is going to let this potential race that has so much great things that can, they're going to let them perish without lifting a finger. So they think tanked it. They thought of this Ark thing, but they said, well, even if we save them, they're not going to transmute their shadow quickly enough to be at this point at the end of the cycle when the Earth's magnetics are at the lowest that they're possibly at right now. They said that what we need to understand is Earth's consciousness has a direct effect with the Earth's magnetic field, and that the lower the magnetic field, the less time there is between thought and manifestation of thought. So if you get into this time of the Mayan calendar, the end of the cycle, and you haven't done your spiritual homework and you got a lot of fear and doubt and nonsense still in your belief system, it's not a good combo, because you're just going to manifest those things. So they said,
wait, hang on. This is very important, because as I've been discussing on the show, this grand processional cycle, which in the ideal is 25,920, you can break it down into subsets of numbers, 2160, 432.0, 1080, that kind of thing. But these are benchmarks for frequency nodal points in the precession of the Earth. The physical precession of the rotational axis of the Earth literally changes the physics on the Earth and in the solar system, and of consciousness embedded in the matrix of the physics of the Earth and the solar system, and it repeats. But it's like, how do you get off the train? How do you How do you change the cycle so instead of being a circle, it becomes a spiral in 3D?
Perfect. It's amazing when you see the actual mechanics behind it, because truly they said, you know, the idea of thought creates reality, and we're in a reflected reality, which is this experiment that we got placed in, by the way. We can get into that because it explains good cop, bad cop. But, well, imagine that this Yankee had went to his mother's side, the Pleiadians, and asked for help. And they seen, well, even if we save them, they're not going to evolve fast enough. So they went back to the table and they came up with another idea, which is, what if mankind was made to experience its own mental energy reflected back in a magnified way, both light and dark, unbiasedly. Whatever you put out, you're going to get back magnified. In theory, that would make you evolve faster, because you might just have to blow through your own darkness.
Well, this goes hand in hand with what I've been saying, is this physics keep changing. The good are getting better and the bad are getting worse. And we've gone through in the last year and a half, 2 years, an extraordinary set of changes. I mean, approaching this real 2012 nodal point, which was really 2016, as I've been saying for like ever since 2012, when I went on Georgia's show and I said 2012 is not 2012, it's going to be delayed because of the alignments, you know, cosmic alignments and the actual real physics. We have been hit with incredible amounts all over the globe of fear porn.
Yeah.
And what it's doing is it's resonating with people who are fearful. And it's also creating an objective thing to be superseded by people who are not fearful. And as my friend Georgia says again and again and again, in order for us to appreciate the dark, it's got to be dragged out into the light, and we got to all look at it. And boy, are we looking at it in stark, almost black and white terms around the planet. I mean, there's nowhere you can look up to and including the rescue of these 12 kids plus their 13th, coach, which to me was incredibly symbolic. And we're going to do a show on that at some point, because children are a part of this very important part. Look at what's happened on our borders. Where are 3,000 missing children tonight?
Yeah, it's sick. That's the thing, is they said, as this experiment rolled out, the Pleiadians said to Inky, well, that's a really interesting concept to make an upcoming race experience its own mental energy in an accelerated fashion and a reflected back holographic reality, which we're in. And they said, even though that might help them to process the shadow, within, but you can't just do that to a race that's never been tried before unless you're willing to go in under the radar yourself, so to speak, and walk a mile in their moccasins and see what it's like to go through this experience. Because you would think that if you were going to put this experiment on to make humans experience their own mental energy in a reflected reality, that they decided to break off into two camps, one that would reflect back a negative polarity. And those are the ones that believe more like, look, they'll always accept the dark carrot. They'll always give their energy, their I am, their sovereignty away to an illusionary outside source. And they will harm their brother, they'll harm their sister, they'll harm their self by giving their energy away. Like I said, that's what he told me, the chief. He said, this is all about self-inflicted suffering through your own free will. It's not allowed on higher levels, and you're tested thoroughly. But so the dark is there to make sure any initiate that's brought before this council, because once you find out that this whole council has been known throughout mankind, they call it the Council of Nine, Council of 12. It's all the same council, by the way. Council of 9 has 17 members, 2 unseen. And they test human initiates, that every initiate that's brought before them gets tested by the light and the dark. The dark is going to test that initiate to see if they can get them to give their I am away, give their energy away to an illusionary outside source. If you do, you become a battery for that side, is what I'm being told. I've heard a whole nother story to that.
So we're
from one of
talking
them.
kind of like a Matrix scenario.
Yes, but you know what?
Except not literally. I mean, the energy is used for other things, not just powering civilizations. But
Yes, but let me tell you, the flip side is the seven lords of light. Because you remember, when Yahweh broke down this info and said, "I work with the seven lords of light and the seven lords of darkness." I can tell you what I found out is the Iroquois and the Cherokee knew of this chief whose name was Yahweh, and he sat in between these two councils of war and peace chiefs. And he was the only one that sat in the middle of these war and peace chiefs and held a seat at both sides. That's how I knew he was Yahweh. So that's why I went back to him and said, I'm being led to understand that you are my brother, Enlil.
Okay, we're out of sync again because we kind of left your story. You joined the band. You were playing with very high-level musicians. What happened next?
It was Lake Eerie UFOs. I live very close to Lake Eerie. And
okay, for people who aren't following the story, what are Lake Eerie UFOs?
It's a suburb of Cleveland, about 20 minutes east. It's Cleveland, Euclid, East Lake. And since I've been living there for such a long time, we were band practicing in my house, and for a break, we went out in the backyard, me and the bass player, and we seen a craft right over the lake, very close. And that I didn't get that one on film, but it sparked my curiosity to start going down to the lake and studying. I would find out where there was a beach or a little park where I could go down around sunset, and I'd be hanging out with a Sony digital handycam. And because of David Sarita, I had learned, that a lot of these crafts show up in higher frequencies that you can't see with the naked eye. They're in like infrared and gamma frequency, So I found out how on my camera to flip it into super night shot infrared mode while I was still filming. So I got some really unique, good footage of UFOs. I found out to take the autofocus off. That helped a lot. Bill Burns said that my footage is some of the best footage they've ever seen of this phenomenon. And by the way, I'm sure you know who Bigelow Aerospace is. They told me, they contacted me in 2011 and said, we know that what you're in contact with is the real deal because we've been studying it over the Skinwalker Ranch. They know it's the Anunnaki, by the way. We can get into that. So I started to accumulate quite a library of this footage.
And what year was this? 2005?
Yeah, from 2005 until 2008 is when things started to go bonkers with this. People their minds were getting blown because of this footage. My YouTube channel, which is Frozen Hill, now has over 4.5 million views. So that's what brought the History Channel to my door. They said, we want to do a show on Skywatchers, and your Lake Eerie UFOs going viral. We want to have you on for about 5 minutes during this segment. So what happened was they had scheduled to come and interview me late 2007. And when they got to Cleveland, they had just come from Washington where they interviewed another contactee. His name was Terrell Copeland, and he was a Marine. And what they found is he had filmed these exact same orbs of light that I had the same story of contact, the same spiritual message given to him, but he had this unknown blood anomaly because he was being shipped overseas, and it came out in his blood work that he had this unknown blood anomaly. So he got an honorary discharge from the military. So that's when the History Channel thought to themselves, I found out afterwards, that isn't it interesting that these two guys that don't know each other, that have filmed the same objects and whatnot, that what if this other guy ended up with the same blood anomaly, meaning me? So without telling me, because they're probably smart.
Wait, hang on. Because in addition to filming these UFOs or light phenomenon over the lake, when did the actual contacts with whoever is in these vehicles, or the vehicles themselves, if they're actually consciousness in plasma form, when did that begin? Because that was part of your story on the History Channel, right?
Yeah, but that was pre meeting the Anunnaki. I began to have a relationship with them over the lake because, honestly, I got tired of filming them. Because when you see it with your naked eye, it's like multidimensional color. It's one of the most beautiful things that I've ever witnessed. But I'm looking at through a little black and white gray screen on my Sony Handycam, just because I knew it was important to document this for humanity. But I hated it. It was like taking me out of the moment. I wanted those colors to hit my retina, you know? So I got to the point where I'd start telling them, listen, I'm putting my camera away until you come in closer or do something that I don't have on film already. Then I'm just going to sit here and enjoy us here, you know? And sure enough, they would come in closer and closer and closer until, I mean, it was just mind blowing.
So it's right out of Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Did you get that on video?
Matter of fact, that whole scene with the orbs of light going down the freeway with the cops chasing the orbs and all that, those were the Lake Eerie UFOs. Spielberg based that off of a real story, and it came off of Lake Eerie. So did the expert
you know
UFO.
that Alan Hynek was a consultant on the movie, right? J. Allen Hynek, the astronomer.
You know what? Yeah, you know what? That's when I met the Anunnaki. The NASA gentleman who talked to me first, we'll get into this. He told me that the J. Allen Hynek family was in charge of, you know, relaying this message of, you know, extraterrestrial information to the public, and that he hated his job because they would make him one day say one thing and the next thing they would make him say something else, you know, and he really hated it. But he said that family is still in charge of what information gets released to humanity. And when I met them in 2008, it was really interesting because they said, do you know anything about this individual who went on coast to coast and talked about a certain senior scientist from Lockheed Martin whose name was Boyd Bushman? I said, yeah, I know everything about him. That's he's in David Sarita's and my documentary, From Here to Andromeda. And at the end of our production shoot, we're working with John Hutchinson, you know, making anti-gravity stuff. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, the reason I brought up Hynek is because his observatory was up there on the lake outside Chicago, and he would have been familiar, being in the field and being working for the Air Force, with the whole Lake Eerie phenomenon. So I presume that's how Spielberg got that angle for that set of scenes in the movie.
That makes perfect sense. Perfect. It's interesting.
You know, at the very end of the film, when they're all coming out to meet the ship, there's a shot of Alan with his pipe coming out from behind a group of guys and walking toward the big, you know, hovering vehicle from the ETs.
Oh, wow. I did not know that.
Yeah, he's actually in the film.
You know what's interesting is this individual sitting in front of me. He goes, I work for a group of people who decide what gets released to humanity. And this senior scientist from Lockheed Martin, Boyd Bushman, information was not on the list. So how could that have happened? And I said, I willed it into manifestation. That got his attention. But he said, how could that be? Because we're in charge. And I said, no, not really. You know, I think it's bull crap that this technology has been withheld from humanity. But I got to tell you, we can get into that as well because, you know, like I was saying, I did get brought into the NSA remote viewers.
Well, let's try to do this kind of linearly. So history contacts you. You wind up doing a show on your videos. They then have another contactee who turns out to have a kind of a rare blood anomaly, gets him discharged. And someone says, wait a minute, we ought to test Michael. Now, why would they think that?
Because he had filmed the exact same orbs of light that I had.
Okay.
Had the same story of the message they were giving to him was that whole, the law of attraction kind of bed of information, thoughts create reality kind of bed of information. And he was getting contacted by behind the scenes secret government groups, as was I, which is strange. I got to tell you, you know, Bill Burns, during the episode Alien Contact I was on, he says, I believe you guys are being contacted by a secret group of, you know, government insiders and giving you a course of study, preparing you to meet your extraterrestrial or higher self. And I thought, what is this guy on? You know, because this is before I met the Anunnaki or anything. It's still strange to this day that Bill Burns knows somehow, because in my living room, you know, when we were filming for the History Channel, it was just he and I. He goes, you know, I hate to say this, but I'm very jealous of the role you'll be playing in the near future between them and us as an ambassador. I thought, what is this guy talking about? Everything came to pass. I was contacted by the NSA remote viewers and everything. So it's all kind of connected, but it started with the History Channel show. And what happened was, because of them having this blood anomaly and the same similar story with this Marine in Washington, 500 miles apart from me, they asked me if I would be willing to fly to Boston to participate in an update to my story. So I said, sure. Well, I don't like needles at all. It's almost like a
Who
phobia.
does? Who does?
I had no idea they're flying me to Boston to have my blood work done by a Harvard professor.
They didn't tell you?
No, they just said,
Why
when you come
not?
to Boston, I don't know. Maybe they knew I'd say no because I am a baby. I had no idea until I got to Boston, and we're like, we're going to go to the hospital. I'm like, what?
So was this a private lab? Was it the university? Was it Harvard? Was it MIT?
It was Harvard. He's a Harvard professor. His name's David Systrom, and he's the one that did the blood work. So, I mean, there's no higher.
So this is a hematologist at Harvard University.
Yes. So what they found was everyone's brains releases an enzyme called creatine kinase. And the normal parts per liter of blood of creatine kinase, it's CK for short, is 25 parts per liter of blood. But if you've had a heart attack or if you've had muscle damage, your brain will start releasing more creatine kinase into the bloodstream because it brings oxygen into the bloodstream to facilitate healing to that wounded area.
Mm-hmm.
And what they found is like...
So wait, if someone has a heart attack, is this a permanent marker or is it kind of an emergency response from the body? And when the damage is past, it goes back to normal.
Exactly. And not only that it only, like, for most of humans, it's 25 parts per liter of blood. And it
what
only
does that
goes
mean?
up.
What does that mean, 25? Usually numbers are quoted like 25 parts per million, 25 parts per thousand.
It was per liter of blood.
So in other words, 1/25th of a liter is this particular enzyme?
They said parts per million of liter, wouldn't it be? I don't know.
That's probably a very tiny percentage, because otherwise it would. Okay, so it's kind of like a marker. Okay, so you see this released in a very slight amount, but it's enough to be detectable and testable.
And it only jumps up to 250 to about 300 tops if you've had damage. What they found in mine and Terrell's blood was almost identical levels of 2100. And the idea is creatine kinase brings oxygen into the bloodstream that equates to how much electrical capacitance you can hold on a cellular level. See, this gets into the whole Nephilim bloodline being created. So the Anunnaki even had a human vessel that could take on their increased energetics, because when they tried to incarnate into the normal human vessel, they would spontaneously combust. Didn't work out real well, so they had to think tank it again. And so
you mean this is the source of spontaneous combustion?
In previous, they said that because go back to when I said Ea Inky went to his mother's side, and they said, isn't anything that can be done? So, well, if you're going to do this experiment to accelerate their conscious evolution, then you need to experience it yourself. Well, they already agreed then, okay, we will incarnate into the human vessel. They couldn't, because they would spontaneously combust. So they created, the Harvard professor said the only thing he could think of, because the deal is there's no medical reason that we're at 2100. For the normal bloodline, it's at 25. It only goes up to about 300 if you've had medical damage. It is an emergency.
So you carry 100 times what normal people carry of this enzyme.
Yes.
Okay.
And
Hold it there. Hold it there.
Mm-hmm.
We're at the bottom of the hour. My guest this morning is Michael Hill. We're discussing some pretty far out stuff, but since there are numbers and the numbers are real, I'm thinking we need to pursue this further. And when we come back, I'm going to ask Michael directly, how did he actually meet, if that's a term, the Anunnaki? You're on the other side of midnight. My name is Richard C. Hoagland. We shall return.
theothersideofmidnight.com. Tune in to listen to Richard C. Hoagland and his fascinating guests. Join Club 19.5 to get access to exclusive member benefits. Listen to past episodes anytime on any device. Search the archives of over 180 episodes. Membership costs $9.95 a month, 33 cents a day. Support the broadcaster to provide you with the most interesting conversation available. Talk radio at the cutting edge of science and thought. theothersideofmidnight.com.
And welcome back to The Other Side of Midnight. This is an extraordinary tale, and it's going to get even weirder because there are markers in the crops to things that Michael has been saying. So, Michael, let me hit it on the head. When did you meet? And when we say meet, are we talking dream state, vision, or, hey, let's go have a beer?
No, this is in the physical, right in front of me, you know, not channeling, not in a dream state, not meditating. This is what had happened was the timeline of this is that episode where they revealed this blood anomaly, which, by the way, to wrap that up, the Harvard professor said the only thing he could think of was that there was some kind of unknown virus that was tricking our brains into releasing these massive amounts of creatine kinase, which was super oxygenating the blood, which brings a lot of chi and prana and life force into the body. That episode is aired in March of 2008. The summer of 2008, I was invited to go to this festival. It ended up being a pagan festival. I have nothing against pagans, but I'm not pagan. But I really thought I was going to camping.
Aren't we all at some level pagans? I mean, we start out pagans and then we evolve into other things because pagans are more primordial.
It's all good. I was asked to go to this festival called Sirius Rising. First of all, I didn't know who the Anunnaki was at that time, but now I know they are Syrian, you know, so Sirius Rising.
They're not just Syrian. They're kind of scattered all over stars in our neighborhood, but
yeah, but they're mostly will claim for the Enlil side that's pure blood Anunnaki. It's Syrian with Orion, but then the other side of the family is Syrian Pleiadian hybrid mix through the Inky bloodline.
Okay, now just to make sure, so people really underscore what we were talking about last night, we're talking human beings genetically who happen to hang their hat on a different piece of real estate, right?
Yeah, they have different motives because they're both included in this council to see how their experiments working to accelerate human conscious evolution. And like I said, one group is going to test you to see if you'll give your I am away to an illusionary outside source. The other side tests any human initiate to see how much love and compassion you bring to any suffering that comes your way. And you got to pass both sides to get past this council. And you're kind of representing humanity before the council because all it takes is one not to be corrupted and be tricked to follow the crowd up the crooked steps, so to speak. But anyhow,
okay, hang on. Let me ask another question then. Mm-hmm. What's the ultimate point of all this? The tests are all to do what?
To help humanity evolve by making us experience our own mental energy. But when I met the Anunnaki at this festival, by the way, Sirius Rising that I'm talking about, there were beings there that they approached me and they made it known to me that they were not from here because they could become faceless right in front of me. I know that sounds crazy, but Chief Blue Star Eagle, another prominent, his work is in the Smithsonian. He came up to me after one of my presentations. He said, I want to tell you I've met the faceless ones as well. And, but anyhow, they
almost like the Men in Black.
Yeah, what I would learn from the NSA is they have such a high cellular capacitance that they're not shapeshifters, but they can send a kind of hijack your neural network and present
So
image.
it's kind of like that scene in Star Wars where these are the droids you're looking for.
Yes, and not only that, I can tell you.
So it's mental. So
it is, but it's
they're
also physical.
Well, are they physically altering their shape, or are they simply clouding your mind so you can't recognize who they are?
Yes, the second one, but what they said at this first meeting in 2008 at this festival was, first of all, we want to talk to you about this blood anomaly that was just revealed on the History Channel, because it's truly an indicator you're of our hybrid bloodline.
Okay, so wait a minute. They didn't find you by themselves. They only found you through the History Channel?
Not only, they didn't even find me through the History Channel. Once everything went down at this meeting, he said, oh my God, we don't know how it is that you're sitting in front of us. It's a miracle, because they didn't expect it. They said, we've been waiting for you to surface. And believe me, at this point, before this time, because they use the technology on me that told there's a lot better methods. If they want to know what someone knows, they have technology to see. Okay. And they said, first of all, they told me that we were once known in your past as the Anunnaki. And then they told me at the same time, you were once known as Ea Enki, the water bearer. None of that stuff made any sense to me, because I didn't have any reference to any of it. They said,
no, wait. Was this at the festival?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how did you wind up going? Was it to play?
It was a friend of mine that owned a metaphysical jewelry store, and she had a vending table at this festival. And she goes, hey, you want to go with me and help me? It's a cool festival, and help me at the table. And I said, yeah, sure. So then all this unfolded. What had happened was that.
When you look back, does that story really make sense?
No, but neither does Dreaming Steve Vai says, welcome aboard, and I win his contest.
No, but that makes perfect sense. That's a direct connection. In other words, things were thrown in your path to cause you to be at a certain place at a certain time to meet certain people. In Washington, they call this plausible deniability. All right. And since we're dealing with humans, even if they're humans at some other level, the patterns repeat. So they plausibly got you to go here without telling you what was going to, like the folks that got you to go to Harvard to have your blood tested without telling you your blood was going to be tested.
Yeah, it's definitely something arranging the chess pieces from above. You know what I mean? You start to just get to the point you just surrender to it.
How does that make you feel? Because to me, that's kind of losing your power. You're not in control. You don't even know what you're doing. It's just kind of, you're going blindly from one, map to the next map.
You're so right. I consider myself like the Forrest Gump of this whole thing. All along through it, it's like, what the heck just happened? And wow, this just, it's just, this is my life. And so many people go, what? You were the Harvard professor said you don't have human blood? You must be crazy. This will be all over the news. And I'm like, and I don't have the ability to deny it. Just watch the show. This isn't my wishful thinking or whatever you want to call it. This is things unfolding. I didn't know I was going to find myself before these beings. And it's interesting what they told me about the processional cycle, because they said their own succession of kingship and how they relate to humanity was based on the processional cycle. And that's why it was so important. It said that the very second we entered the age of Aquarius, that old experiment of dark and light and accelerated intelligence is what they call it, is over. We would have either learned our lesson or we would have self-imploded ourselves. And it was down to the wire, so I heard, but they said humanity has earned the right to be treated as equals because we're still here.
Did they say why? What kind of test did we pass? Because if you know, there was a guy named the Sleeping Prophet, Edgar Cayce, who was forecasting in his dream state, in his trance state, all kinds of physical catastrophes like California falling into the Pacific and that kind of thing. which haven't happened. And yet he's been accurate in other areas. So it's like, how did the timeline get changed? Or have we collectively somehow changed the timeline?
No, you know what? That's the work I did with the NSA, the remote viewers.
We haven't gotten to the NSA part. So
yeah.
Do you want to go there and then come back to the Anunnaki?
No, we can go, like, just to give you a nutshell, that's the work I did with them, is work on taking the intensity out of Hurricane Sandy, Earthquake Charlotte, and some of the effects of the galactic superwave that was coming here. And they knew this as well. I know you know what I'm talking about. But
is this Paul LaViolette's so-called superwave?
Yes, exactly. The NSA gave us tons of information. What we were taught is remote viewing ability to, each one of us had a team member, and we could.
Well, wait, you jump way ahead. We have to get you introduced to the NSA.
Right on.
Right.
Okay, back to the Anunnaki, 2008. So they said humanity had earned the right to be treated as equals. They said, we don't know how it is that you're here in front of us. It's a miracle because we've been waiting for you to surface, and now we can have this council meeting. I was thinking, what the heck are these people talking about again?
About like, you, Michael, Burns, Hill, the weird bloodline.
Yeah, I'm like, what do you want to talk to me about? And they said there will be another celestial object in the skies very soon, and it won't be debatable. People are going to look up and go, wow, there's a second sun. And they said that people will be drawn to the work of the Zachariah Sitchin. At that time, I didn't know anything about him. They said people are going to realize, well, wasn't this planet inhabited? Isn't this who the Sumerians called the Anunnaki? You know, and so they said, we want to know everyone's opinions on what effect this will have on Earth's institutions, religious, governmental. What do we think is going to happen? And a lot of their, so they said, well, if it's okay with you, would you be willing to have a council meeting? Mind you, that was a total change of attitude for this individual. Before this, it was Marduk of the Anunnaki I was sitting in front of. And I do know his name. He's a very high-ranking member of NASA, by the way. And his female companion also was a very high-ranking member of NASA. And he's the one that said he works for the J. Allen. He's a blood member of the J. Allen Hynek family. And he said, you know, they've been in charge for a very long time of, you know, what gets released. So they said,
is this person's name a secret?
You know what? I don't like to give names of people that he's family. You know what I mean? Not family to me, but maybe. But he's a real person, and he works for NASA. And I'll tell you off, I just don't feel it.
I perfectly respect that. I just obviously I have to ask the question. Okay.
Right on.
Ask. You don't get answers.
I will tell you off the. I'll tell you. But so what happens is, will you be part of this council meeting? Right now, we can have it at this Sirius Rising Festival in this gazebo tent structure we were in. And I said, I have no clue what you're talking about, but what do you want to talk about? And he said, we want to talk about how humanity is going to respond. And a lot of them were very fearful of
how it will respond to this celestial phenomenon. And this conversation was taking place in 2008.
Yes. And a lot of people were like, fundamentalist religious people might just flip out, and it went around.
If it can be harmonized with their belief systems. See, Art Bell and I used to always have this conversation and this disagreement. He felt that making this public would cause people to go basically nuts. And my feeling is that people are such in their bubbles that they will somehow incorporate whatever happens into their belief system, and it will be relatively smooth.
I think so too. You know what I told them is, I said, why don't you release the reality of this other intelligence in Earth's past first? That should alleviate some of the fear. If they meant us harm, we wouldn't be talking right now, because they have the ability to wipe us off this planet many times over.
Oh, sure.
But, you know, people don't even know what's coming down the pike. Carmen Bolter, I'm friends with her, and they're getting ready to reveal they found a massive underground complex in Egypt, and some of the rooms are the size of grocery stores. This is all 60 feet below the sand.
She's been on the show and she's talked about this.
Right on. The same way, there's hundreds of pyramids still under the sand in Egypt that they know with ground penetrating radar.
Mm-hmm.
And wait till the Anunnaki show up with their sand suckers. Then what? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I don't mean to make a joke out of it, but it's not going to take much. Humanity has never seen a pristine pyramid with its outer casing still there and to the tolerance of like
when you say
glass.
You mean contemporary humanity.
Right, exactly. So I said, this is what's happening now in Antarctica and everything, because, we had this conversation and I said, first of all of these judgments you're passing on mankind has been when we're been forced into this economic slavery system of fight or flight, and it's not fair to judge anyone under these conditions. Why don't you release the oppression and of mankind by these dark forces who...
Well, just a couple things like energy that doesn't destroy the planet. That would be a big step forward.
Yeah. What's crazy with that, though, is further down the line, I worked on a show for Spike TV, and at the very last time, at the same time I was working with the NSA, it got shut down and it's never been able to be aired till this point. So the head of the remote viewers took me into this meeting with all these elitists, and he made them tell me why.
Wait. You're jumping ahead again. We're still with the Anunnaki. We haven't gotten to the NSA yet.
Right on. Remind me to touch on, they told me why this subject of extraterrestrial intelligence has been withheld for 25 years. Getting back to the Anunnaki, they said that once I said, why don't we release the reality of this intelligence in humanity's past first, that should alleviate a lot of the fear. They said, well, it must be time. And
well, here's sorry to interrupt, but here's the interesting thing. People are afraid of things or beings they don't know, the unknown. Huge fear factor, okay?
Mm-hmm.
But once it's acknowledged that we have family out there, family is family is family. It changes the entire equation. Of course, it knocks history and religion into a cocked hat, which is why they're not going to do it for the time being. But once you introduce the idea of family, which is why I'm doing these shows, I want people to realize we're not talking bug-eyed monsters. We're not talking guys that come and abduct you. We're talking cousins. We're talking family. We're talking a plan that's been, at least 26,000 years in the making.
Indeed. It's actually so confirming to me, like some of these beings went to great lengths and put themselves at risk to go to bat for humanity. And they've been the ones that didn't believe in humanity, like my brother. We've talked about this now, and he's been proven wrong that mankind is much more than slave labor. And so in this,
there must be a reason why we're feared in certain portions of the galaxy and certain portions of folks that are out there, because we've got something special. There's something unique about Homo sapiens.
Indeed. They said what's happening with us is because of this experiment to make this since 26,000 years ago, it's just a blink in a cosmic time scale, But because of this experiment of making us experience our own mental energy, the Anunnaki themselves said, you don't understand, because they said they experience time differently than we do, and that it would be like us working with a chimpanzee and trying to raise its conscious awareness level to self-aware. And we're doing these experiments, and we had a 2-week vacation, and we went on our 2-week vacation, and when you came back, your chimpanzee was having rock concerts and government and world wars, and to them they said it was the results of this experiment have exceeded blowing their own minds at how fast mankind is evolving. They said, we don't realize it because we're in it. It's kind of like that twins paradox, with Einstein, that unless you come back into your brother's timeline that's in a different time, like there's no problem, but I'm sorry, I spun out.
Okay, back to the precessional cycle. The precessional cycle drives the physics drives consciousness. We go through periods of enlightenment and then periods of darkness, dark ages. My question has been, looking at this from the outside, where are we in the cycle? Are we approaching dawn, or are we still at midnight? Is the physics still so low that all the weird, horrible stuff going on can continue to go on because there aren't very many lights in the darkness?
I'll tell you, we are in the age of Aquarius now. When we get into the crop circles, they have encoded the information of exactly where we are in the calendar and have stated that we're in the 14th Baktun, which there isn't no 14th Baktun. It's the Mayan calendar ends in the 13th Baktun because they said it would make no sense to keep the calendar going, because between the 13th and the 14th Baktun, which is 144,000 days in each Baktun, that the end of the 13th marks the end of the age of Pisces and into the age of Aquarius. So what the Anunnaki was telling me was the second we entered the age of Aquarius, that this experiment would have run its course of accelerating human conscious evolution by making us experience our own mental energy in a reflected, accelerated fashion. So at that time,
when is this transition supposed to have taken place?
2016.
And the end of 2016, during the solstice, when we aligned with the black hole at the center of the galaxy. Okay.
Yeah. How this information came to me, so you'll know with your own research into this, is, we'll get into the 432 subject, but it's really simple mathematics that, Pythagoras came up with the right way. Like if you have your middle note on a piano tuned properly to A equals 432 hertz, not 440, there's still a lower A note on your piano. It's called an octave for those that don't know. There's still a lower, one lower whole cycle lower. And he said, if you want to find the proper frequency scientifically, all you do is divide by 2. So you got 432 divided by 2 is 216. 216 divided by 2 is 108. 108 is interesting because of Tibetan monks having 108 prayer beads on their bracelets, chanting certain mantras 108 times. And then lower is 54, and then lower is 27. So what gets interesting...
And hang on. And if you multiply those by 10, so the 216 becomes 2160?
Yes.
That's the diameter of the moon.
Mind-blowing, ain't it?
Because it's a design system, Michael.
Yes.
In my research, what we were talking about last night about timelines with Ron and the rest of the team, how deep in history, how deep in time does this planning go? And I think it goes back almost 600 million years when the solar system was prepared for this experiment.
Yes, it's mind-blowing, isn't it? It's like truly...
Oh, we're past mind-blowing. Believe me, we left mind-blowing, 10 truck stops back, okay?
Right on. Yeah, and the same thing. Take 432 times 2 to the higher octave is 864. Then with the sun,
864,000 miles. And how wide is Jupiter? 84,000. In other words, it's all octaves of the physics of the reality that's been created for us to evolve and change in. This is school. This is an academy. The problem is, it's not just an academy, it's also a prison. How the hell did it become a prison?
Because, when I was brought before the Council of Light and Dark, and it was explained to me, this is all about self-inflicted suffering. He said, Michael, you're at the most compassionate level of this. There's 7 more sun dances going on simultaneously on this planet right now. And right now at this one, it's the most compassionate. It's right in the middle, that not too many people are suffering. You got fewer people out there dancing. If someone collapses from exhaustion, you got, a certain individual out there to help them and give them water and cool them off. He said, right now there's a Sundance Dark 3 that has over 500 people dancing at it, much more suffering. And if you collapse at that one, you get stepped on. And it goes down the track of like, they'll just keep you, how messed up are you of a human? Because it always ends. That path ends in the 7th realm of child sacrifice or animal sacrifice. And it's just like, you've anyhow, when he was telling me, you're at the most compassionate version of this. And I said, has anyone started to go down the dark path and turned around and said, no, this isn't right, and didn't go along with it? He said, no one ever. Not until I had to pat myself on my back. He said, not until you. You know what I did? This is an Illuminati-infested Native American Indian ceremony that goes back 27,000 years. And part of it, he told me, there's mind control going on to get people to enter the dark circle. And he said part of that Illuminati mind programming is they need to suffer as much as possible, so no one prays for rain. And it's drilled into them, you never pray for rain. And I didn't know this. And at this festival, at the end of the second day, seeing my friends out there just in the blistering sun, it was like 100 degrees. And I out of pure compassion, at the end of day 2, I prayed for rain so they would have a little release from their suffering that I was seeing, Well, between me and you and your listeners, the NSA calls it LERM, Light Encoded Reality Matrix, but it's truly starting to become a co-creator. I brought in a rainstorm, and this storm looked like something. I got a video of it, by the way. Someone filmed it in Iowa where this was. It came in over the Sundance grounds and released this unbelievable healing water, and that stopped the ceremony, because what he relayed to me, he said, it's in the programming, the Illuminati mind control to get someone to go dark, to never pray for rain. So if you didn't succumb to that mind control anyhow, and you prayed for rain, you're not susceptible to that mind programming. But if you prayed for rain, you also showed love and compassion for your fellow human being, and you automatically got a, well, go ahead, pass from the 7 Lords of Light, who will test you to see how much love and compassion you bring to any suffering that comes your way. So that was the end. They said, and if one person can do it, any of us can do it, because we're truly all one on a quantum level, And so that's the thing, is why the Anunnaki incarnated into the human Nephilim bloodline was to represent mankind before this exact same council that all other humanity would be judged before. And we would go in and have memory blocks upon birth to make it a plain, equal playing field, that we could not come at any energetic level above any human being. So that was the gig. So this whole cycle, no one has got through the testing. Even in myself, in every past incarnation I've ever lived, somehow they tricked me. And he did say too, he goes, Michael, another thing happened there. He goes, what you just experienced is the darkest way, the trickiest way the dark get you to enter their territory is through love and compassion. What I witnessed, first of all, it haunted me for months. It was very disturbing to me to see the level of self-inflicted suffering of humans pushing these needles. The bigger dudes they pull 7 buffalo skulls behind themselves attached into the flesh of their back. And when they rip themselves free, that's when they would get a message from spirit. And it was interesting because at one point there was a large gentleman pulling a lot of buffalo skulls behind himself, and he couldn't free himself. He couldn't get the needles to rip free from the flesh. So this is really dark shit, man. Excuse my language. They brought children in to sit on the buffalo skulls to weigh it down so he could free himself. As he was coming before me, the chief looked at me and said, Michael, there's a million ways to pull those buffalo skulls behind oneself. There's a million ways to give your energy away to illusionary outside sources. That's only one.
Hold it there. We're at the top of the hour. I'm sorry. We're going to open the phone lines if you want to talk to Michael. My guest this morning, Michael Hill, and we're entering some very deep territory. Here on the other side of midnight, my name is Richard Hoagland, and we shall return.
Hold it in my hand. I wish I might. It's not
theothersideofmidnight.com. Tune in to listen to Richard C. Hoagland and his fascinating guests. Support the broadcast and don't miss another groundbreaking conversation. Join Club 19.5 to get access to exclusive member benefits. Listen to past episodes anytime on any device. Search the archives of over 180 episodes. Membership costs $9.95 a month, 33 cents a day. Talk radio at the cutting edge of science and thought. theothersideofmidnight.com.
Side of midnight, if you really listen hard, you can hear what the universe is saying.
Well, you know what that means. That's Bobby Bright, all the way from Australia. That's our kind of open hailing frequencies theme song. So if you want to call us, the phone number to talk to Michael is 917-889-8802. 917-889-8802. We've got a call sitting here, been on hold for about 10 minutes. Let me see if we can bring them on the air and see if they have a question of Michael at this stage in this unfolding tale. Caller, you're on the air. Area 224. Are you there? Hello. Area code 224, are you on the air? The lights say you are, and the lack of sound says you're not. I don't understand what's going on with these connections. We got to figure out what goes on with Blog Talk, because if people wait more than a couple, 3 minutes, apparently they go into some limbo. Okay, let's figure this out. Here's Bobby. We'll be right back.
The other side of midnight, you can find your place. On the other side of midnight, everything is clearer when you're dealing with the mysteries of time and space. The other side of midnight, if you really listen hard, you can hear what the universe is saying. Time for you to wander through the mansions in your mind. Nothing to lose, there's everything to find. Other side of midnight, other side of midnight, other side of midnight, other side of midnight, other side of midnight.
And welcome back, everyone. I'm sorry, caller 224, you got to call back in. I don't know what's going on with the circuitry at Blog Talk, but if you are on hold more than a few minutes, it disappears you down some kind of timeless black hole. I hope people aren't being missed in in church and in work and all that, because they disappear down the Blog Talk black hole. My guest this morning is Michael Hill. And I think, Michael, it's time to move from the Anunnaki meeting where you were introduced to a whole bunch of things that you had never heard of before, which I find intriguing, to the NSA. How the hell did the NSA enter the picture?
Well, that was the group of people that were truly working with the Anunnaki and extraterrestrial technology transfer programs that started when they met Eisenhower. And, when the head of this, technology transfer program said that, well, people don't know you may know this, but when they met Eisenhower, not only were they worried about the nuclear weapons, like you don't know what you're dealing with, we'll help you get to unlimited free energy, but you got to let go of your nuclear power ambitions. And they weren't ready to do that. And
I was going to say that hasn't been too successful, has it?
no. And they said, we know you're also meeting with the Greys. We highly...
But hang on. Why not? Because hyperdimensional torsion field energy-based systems are non-polluting. They're non-destructive. They don't, they walk lightly on the earth, all this stuff. And they give us infinite amounts of energy to be used. And energy is part of wealth. It's part of that triad equation. So why would our guys reject the idea of another energy source in favor of staying with nuclear technology and nuclear weapons? What was the upside for them?
Perfect, because what they said was, because of working 9 months of my life with Spike TV, at the very end, it was never allowed to be aired because of national security, sitting on a shelf somewhere. That's really weird to me. I know that there's this professional show done on my life. But anyhow, so the head of this remote reverse engineering program. So by the way, that's how all this happened, is he was already working with the Anunnaki, because he said what people don't know with Eisenhower was also they...
Wait a minute, this is the NSA guy. Does this guy have a name, or is he anonymous?
He does.
How did you meet?
His name is A.R. Borden, and I had become a student of this bed of information called the Wingmakers material. And once you go to and start investigating, you'll find out that it was Dr. Neruda who defected from this remote viewers group of the NSA. And so
when you say the NSA remote viewers, this is before the Stanford guys?
This is the very beginning of it. This is who... this is the individual that Philip Corso would have went to. This is the individual that found out part of the JFK whole thing. But there's two different Lee Harvey Oswalds. They know the one that went to Russia. No matter what, you got to have your height measured, and it wasn't Harvey Oswald. This was this head of the NSA guy. His name in the Wingmakers lore is 15, because he was just the 15th person to lead this group. And Russia knew we had reverse engineered MiG fighter jet. It ended up in the MiG fighter jets. It was radar technology that was truly reverse engineered technology. So in the 60s, we were about ready to go to the war with Russia. And at the last moment, and there's a reason behind that too, but at last moment they said, well, listen, if you'll share your radar technology with us, we will not send these Manchurian candidate created soldiers back home. And so at this point, it was this individual who hand delivered the technology to Russia. And I've released all this information, exactly the company that built the MiG fighter jets and them using this radar system that was revealed. But make a long story short, I had studied this interviews with this defector from this special NSA group. And they had talked about a subject called LERM, light encoded reality matrix, and electrical neurosensing ended up being another technology transfer program. Picture Anunnaki assisted remote viewing. But what happened was I asked them, I said, well, if evidently they were right that we don't know what we're dealing with nuclear energy, look at Fukushima and stuff. And I said, what's it going to take to get another
Michael, it's even deeper than that, because nuclear physics is the key to cracking dimensions. There's a reason why all those nuclear tests were conducted, and they weren't to develop weapons. They were used to develop access to a technology and a knowledge base that transcends nuclear physics there's no way to put a number on it. And the reason I know that is because when I was having a dinner in Boulder, Colorado many years ago, the French were conducting nuclear tests in the South Pacific. Kind of weird in the atmosphere. It was kind of like very retro. I mean, why would you conduct nuclear tests when everybody now knows how damaging radioactivity in the atmosphere is, and everybody else has gone underground? The Americans, the Russians, underground tests don't release radioactivity, supposedly. The French are conducting these tests, and the guy who was hosting me for dinner, I'm not going to mention his name because there's no reason to, but a pretty interesting guy with a lot of money and trying to do good things. And he comes rushing in and he says, "Do you know where the French are conducting their nuclear tests?" And he splashed this big map on the table in this Japanese restaurant where we were going to meet. And it turned out to be exactly at the antipodes or opposite the location of the Great Pyramid at Giza. And that's when I knew what they were doing with these nuclear tests in the 40s and 50s was basically pinging the spider web to connect dots in terms of this higher level physics. And that's why we wouldn't give it up, because why would you accept a third party information source when you could figure it out yourself?
That, and, because I said to this individual, A.R. Borden, I said, "What's it going to take to get another offer on the table? Because I think we could use their help." And he said, "What makes you think we didn't go into technology transfer programs with them right then and there? It just was never made public." So since 1950s, the Anunnaki and our government has been working, factions of the Anunnaki have been working in technology transfer programs. And A.R. Borden was the head of this. And he's the one that, like I said, Philip Corso would have even went to. But so what happened was, when my Spike TV show got shut down, he took me into a meeting, like a Skype kind of meeting, but there's like about 8 different individuals. All these people, I don't know who they were, but the guy that did the most talking was a really young guy. And it was to the point of him going, "Well, tell Michael what we know about the orbs of light." And the guy's like, "Well, we think that there's some type of extraterrestrial drone of sorts, but that it might not be from our timeline. It may be from our past or our future." And that was confirmed by Bigelow too. I mean, yeah, when I was contacted by Gary Hernandez because of the Lake Eerie UFO stuff, he said these aren't regular aircraft as we think of them, as nuts and bolts and metal, that they have more to do with portals and time travel. But so what happens is A.R. Borden brings me into this meeting and tells them, "Explain to Michael why his show isn't allowed to be aired." So this guy starts talking. He said, "Well, first of all, we've been in control of what gets released to humanity for a very long time. And here you are with your YouTube channel with 4.5 million views. You're on the History Channel saying whatever you want to say. We're totally cut out of the loop. How do you think that makes us feel?" I said, "I don't think you really, I don't really care. You know what I mean? This is my life.
Why should I care what you feel?" Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Like I don't get it. But here's what they said. They said, "What?"
Oh, wait, hang on. There's something really weird here. If they're totally in control, and that sounds to me like doublespeak, because if they were, they wouldn't have to say they were. Okay. How did you even get to the History Channel? How did you get a UFO, a Yahoo, YouTube channel? How did they allow it to get that far if they're totally in?
They know they're not in control, Richard. That's the fascinating part.
That's what I'm saying.
To them, they know. No, it's that I'm changing timelines. I'm willing. They said that none of the stuff I brought to the table with extraterrestrial or Lake Eerie UFOs, it wasn't to be released to the public. They don't have say-so over me. I am sovereign, and this happened to me, and they have no say-so. And as long as I stay in the truth of this, they can't touch me. And
now that goes not just for you, but for anybody is absolutely the truth. Okay.
Absolutely. So what they said was, that's why I was brought into the NSA in the first place, because they said that there's not too many people that can tune in at will and hit 0 point, where you're in a very deep meditative state and truly have shown that you can bring in a rainstorm. You can bring in realities that were not part of this timeline, because I think it's right that this has not been, they've withheld this from humanity, and it's stopping our evolution. And I don't agree with it. So it's that simple. You know what I mean? they said that these realities that are happening, like the guy getting in front of me saying, how did Boyd Bushman come into the media? That wasn't on the list. And well, it's because I willed this documentary into manifestation, and that was the result. And so now you're going to have to deal with it because it's out there. All along, I've shown them that I can will in realities that are not part of their script. And we're doing it right now, you know, because what they said is what they were fearful of. They said there's very many intelligent people on this planet. You don't need extraterrestrial intervention to get to unlimited free energy. Said very smart people like Tesla started to figure it out, even though he was in contact with ETs. But they said the problem is, and I want to be very clear, I'm not saying I believe what they told me. I'm being a relayer of message that they said that, what do you think that a Middle Eastern terrorist who would, you know, stone a woman in the middle of a village because she had a rumor of having an affair, what do you think that they're going to do with their unlimited free energy? They said, what we don't understand is that it's truly the great equalizer, but it's truly, there won't be one person on this planet that does not have access to unlimited free energy. So it's pretty much they didn't trust humanity with unlimited free energy. They said if we release this subject of extraterrestrial being here even, well, the next logical thought is, well, how'd they get here? What's their propulsion systems? How are they getting from A to B? That leads to unlimited free energy, and they didn't trust humanity with being able to handle it. That it said, like, with unlimited free energy, you know, you could make a weapon that would make a suitcase bomb look like child's play. So again, they said, what are you going to do with those that would misuse it? And in this meeting with these elitists, I said, well, we're all in agreement. There is higher sources of intelligence. Why don't we talk to a race that maybe went through this phase of their evolution 1 million years ago and got past this evolutionary phase of war and these type of thought forms? I don't want to talk to Putin. I definitely don't want to talk to Trump. You know, let's talk to those guys, you know, and, you know, judge a tree by the fruit it bears. You know, when you see what races can become when they learn that's what happened with the Peacemaker story, with how the Iroquois was turned into a confederacy because Hiawatha failed. They went to take out this chief that was not going along with the plan. This individual from the Canada side named the Peacemaker came and he showed them another way. They had went with the arrow. He showed them the olive branch. They went to this chief that was holding up this unity, and they said, we're not here to take you out like they did in the last time, that we would like you to come and join this union. That became the United Iroquois Confederacy. This isn't my story. This is like, ask any Iroquois how they became united, and they're still united to this day. It's the oldest. So think of this experiment that started 27,000 years ago. Take the United States as the culmination of that experiment. The end of this cycle will give humanity free reign, hands off. All team members go to the sidelines, and humanity is allowed to make its own choices, light or dark. And this is not ever what our intending forefathers pictured for this. Picture the people that they learned this from, the Iroquois. They had got past a generation after generation of their tribes being at war, and they were at total peace and unity. This is not what was intended. So what's going on is, with Graham Hancock and everyone talking about, well, who is these mound builders who became the Iroquois, who set up this actual ending? All of this is going to be revealed. You know, the law did not start in 1776. There's ground law abiding stones with symbols that the Templars left here, showing who this land is owned by. I'm dealing with Iroquois lawyers right now that they said they don't know. People don't know that anyone that has a drop of Native American Indian blood, there's already treaties that are on the law books that people just don't know about them, that have signatures on them, like George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin, saying that all Native American Indians keep their land. You are not to impede upon their sovereignty, as accepted. Instead, we had, what did they call it when they said they're savages, and manifest destiny, and so anyhow, getting back to the why they're keeping this information from us, they said, we truly don't trust humanity with it. Again, I said, well, let's go to higher sources. And I said, and if you're so fearful that people are going to freak out, again, let's release the reality of this Anunnaki intelligence in humans past first. And they said, well, all right, we're going to give that a shot. And that's exactly what's happening now. And I know that we're on a new path now, because the whole thing that they said is the ET subject leads to unlimited free energy propulsion systems, and they do not trust humanity with it. So they call them transhumanists. They said, these are the people behind the Georgia Guidestones, that humanity needs to be kept below 500 million. That they threw, that's interesting too, because that's the work we did in 2012 was to go up against those people, and the mission was successful. They wanted a lot of those earth changes to happen and to have a lot less people on this planet, because in their dark little minds, they were going to go into their underground bunkers, and then the dust settled, they would come up and have their little utopia with unlimited free energy and not have to worry about us pesky muggles or whatever they call us.
So to cut to the chase, the NSA meeting you had introduced you to the idea of controllers, but controllers who apparently are very bad at control, because all kinds of things are leaking through, a number of them because of what you're trying to accomplish, right?
Well, what they're realizing is that person they've been waiting, both sides, by the way, that would have the blood of Team Good Cop and Bad Cop, I am here. And it just so happens the Illuminati side was thinking I would be siding with them. And it's not. When you find out that the Anunnaki Nephilim bloodline, the oldest one on the planet from Atlantis or Poseidon, as Edgar Cayce said, by the way, I want to state before I slip off of this, a lot of people know Edgar Cayce did the prophecy of the Hall of Records and it being under the paw, but they don't know. He also said what happened to the Atlanteans. And he said Atlantis went out in 3 earth changes. One was 51,000 years ago. 27,000 years ago was the biblical flood deluge event. And then 10,500 years ago was the last breakup of Atlantis when a meteorite hit. And 10,500 years ago, for the last group of Atlanteans that stayed behind with the sinking ship, so to speak, went to the left for the first time, and they came up into the bottom of the North American continent, and they met the Mayans first, and they showed them the Mayan calendar and pyramid building. Even the Mayans are like, well, this Cody Quetzal, big white dude, showed up and showed us how to do all this. So Edgar Cayce said that, but mind you, see, this is what's important, is to understand any of this. You got to keep in mind that 27,000 years ago, we went into an experiment to make humanity experience its own light and dark in a magnified fashion. When we're talking about 10,500 years ago, this experiment had been going on for a very long time. So the Atlanteans end up in Mexico, and sooner or later darkness sets in, and they're like, well, we need to start chopping people's heads off because the gods aren't happy. And so the mound builders are like, hell, I don't think they're getting it, let's keep going. So they go up through the middle of the North American continent and becoming what's known as the mound builders. This is all Edgar Cayce, by the way. And Edgar Cayce said the mound builders eventually intertwined mostly into the Iroquois tribe of Indians. So everything I'm saying has already been confirmed and backed up by Edgar Cayce. But by the way, I hope we have time to get into this. That's what I found the actual Hall of Records. It's in East Lake, Ohio, and it's an unpilfered ancient mound site that no one knows about. It takes over a mile to walk around it, and it's pretty mind-blowing. It's right where all this UFO activity was going on. And the head of the NSA group, he said, Michael, you know what's underneath you in that Lake Eerie area? I said, no, not really. He said, it's the largest underground base in the world, and it's not ours. So it's interesting that they're telling me that he said the last time he's been actually down into the base, and he said, I took that long drive up Route 75, and there was an entrance there. Well, that happens to be Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Dayton, Ohio. Mm-hmm. So he's saying one of the entrances to this Anunnaki underground base. And he also told me, he said, the Serpent Mound and these mounds in the future are going to be proof to the world that the Anunnaki was in North America very long ago, and these mounds are their property. By the way, these mounds, one wall will be 1,080 feet long. Another wall is 2,160 feet long.
Are you familiar? I mean, if you follow my stuff, you must have heard the name Carl Monk.
That's ringing a bell.
If you haven't, you need to research Carl Monk, because Carl Monk has laid out the mathematics of the Native American sites, the Mayan sites, the European sites. There's a global network of this math, exactly the same math we're going to talk about in a few minutes in connection with the crop circles and whoever is trying to teach us in the fields, in the life-giving substance of, crops themselves, the basic physics of energy, life, healing, science, technologies. It's all been laid out in these incredible geometries, and that's what we're going to spend the last half hour in the next few minutes getting into. And there have been images taken, camera, video, showing that crop circles are created by orbs of light. You've seen those, right?
Oh yeah, imagine that, huh?
Imagine that. What a surprise. What a surprise.
And
let me tell people. Well, of course,
crop circles, yeah.
So that's our next half hour. Let me give out the number again. If you want to join the conversation, there's still time to ask Michael some key questions. I've got a million of them. We don't have time. We need more hours. So we'll try to, set up this future show between you and our friend in Canada, and that should be very interesting because he's a very good researcher. So if you want to call us, you got a couple of minutes here when we go to break. 917-889-8802. 917-889-8802. And we'll take your call when we come back from the break. And obviously that will work because we won't let you hang there for too many minutes. Blog Talk apparently has some kind of block. We've got to figure out what the block is. And we will, try to accommodate you if you want to join the conversation. If not, we will definitely resume in talking about what we really wanted to talk about all evening, but we had to kind of set it up so it would make sense. What kind of information is encoded in the crops? That is the $64 million question. So on that note, you're on the other side of midnight. My name is Richard C. Hoagland, and we shall return.
Please support the show by subscribing to Club 19.5 and join our very interesting community. To To do that, please visit the website, theothersideofmidnight.com, and click on the Join Club 19.5 link in the left-hand column. As a Club 19.5 member, you'll gain access to the rest of this show and all previous 350-plus shows that we have done. Now, recent Club 19.5 member archive recordings have the commercials removed, and the sound quality has been enhanced. You'll also receive a dedicated private podcast feed that contains these enhanced show recordings. And you'll be able to download the MP3 files directly from the archive if you prefer. As a Club 19.5 member, you'll have access to a private chat server that members use to chat about the show during the show, and you will have a direct channel to post a question that will be read on the air to the guest. And you'll have a place to post questions during our open hailing frequencies. We realize that not everyone wants to call in live, and this gives you an easy way to participate in a live show without having to participate. Club 19.5 members can use this private chat to talk about the shows, ask questions, suggest new guests, and I may even pop on from time to time to answer specific questions. Also, the entire bridge crew is in these participating chat channels, so you can interact with them as well. You'll also be the first to preview our new videos and reports. We'll be adding exclusive new features to Club 19.5 as we go forward, and boy, have we got some amazing things to tell you about in the coming weeks. So please support the show and don't miss all the exciting new things we have planned. I want to thank all our Club 19.5 members because without your guys' support, this show would not be on the air. Please help us continue growing the show by subscribing to Club 19.5 today. And when I say we really need you, we really need you. Over and out.
Welcome back, everyone, to the last half hour on this Sunday night, July 15th, on the other side of midnight. Michael, it's time to turn to what I think is probably the most interesting and intrusive manifestation of some other consciousness trying to do something with this nursery, which is crop circles. Yes. And you have an entire video which is linked to the other side of midnight. If you go to the guest page, and you get there by going to theothersideofmidnight.com and click on the graphic for tonight, Michael Lee Hill. That will take you to the guest page. Scroll down to Michael's items. Item number 1 is a video of your research and guidance into this whole 432 hertz subject of the Anunnaki. So let's start there. How did you get the connection between the Anunnaki and crop circles?
Well, simultaneously, what happened was, back in 2008 when I met them at first, and they said, you were once known as Inky, the water bearer. By the way, the water bearer with the bring in the rainstorm that shut down the Illuminati. Mm-hmm. Now I can look someone in the eye and go, yeah, I am the water bearer. But anyhow, in 2009, but mind you, if you never heard of the Anunnaki, there was no ancient aliens on TV. I didn't know what Inky even meant. It's kind of like someone coming up and going, hey, dude, you were the Easter Bunny? All right. All right, whatever.
By the way, is your astrology sun sign Aquarius?
No, it's Pisces. I'm a double fish.
You're a double
Pisces.
Okay.
Yeah. So I put out a challenge, but I wanted confirmation. I said, listen, if you are who you say you are, and I am who you say I am, encode the name Ia Inky into a crop circle. I can guarantee you I will take notice. And then the next thought in my mind was, what a silly request. In my mind, I seen a big crop circle with like Inky written in cursive. I'm like, well, what's that going to prove to anybody? But then I thought, well, you know what? Screw it. If you are who you say you are, you'll figure it out. Figure out a cool way to do it. Right. I'll be paying attention. And then I got cocky. I said, while you're at it, encode it with only something I would be able to decode. And this is in 2009. So 2 years pass until 2011 and the crop circle shows up. But I want to tell you, in that 2 years of waiting, I was guided into this 432 subject. And
so you had to have prep time before the messenger would appear.
yes, or being able to even decode it. Because what had happened is I met this person that knew how to make these crystal discs out of really fine crystal glass. And it was a Pleiadian download to this gentleman named Gregory. Crap, I don't remember it. But anyhow, this lady that was a student of him and learned how to do this. They said the most important thing was the sacred geometry that was inside it. You know, if you take subtle energy, for instance, like pyramid power, that the pyramid form geometry has a certain subtle energy with it. And then the disc is wrapped in copper that it will hold any energy in. But when you hold it in your hand connects the circuit, so to speak, so it amplifies chi coming through it. Well, at the same time,
can we get a couple to beta test?
Oh, absolutely. That's what I'm doing now. I'm providing them for the world. It's pretty interesting.
Because you know, this is just encoded physics. It's HD torsion field physics, straight HD physics.
Yes, indeed. I'd love to get you. I'll get you some samples here. So what happened was I had been guided into this scientific new technology called cymatics, which for the first time, it's science that makes the invisible visible. It shows
describe for the audience how cymatics visually appears.
Right on. Well, it started off, many people might be familiar with if you take a large plate and you put sand on it, and then you have a bow and it's tuned to a specific frequency. Let's say it is you go, rub the bow on the plate. You watch the sand dance and certain geometry forms, and it's not random. Every single time specific frequencies are formed, a specific pattern shows up in the sand. Well, that has now evolved to the point of them having a large bucket of water, man. It's weird because back Sumer, Inky was always shown with a pail of water. People were like, why are you at a purse? It's not. He's just a water bearer. It's water. But anyhow, in this giant thing of water that's held in a big tripod, so there's no frequency going in it, they have a waveform generator and they pump frequency through it, and they have a high-tech camera on the top of it that records what's going on the surface. And these are very detailed cymatic images for the first time. By the way, that's what happened is I hired these scientists from, if people want to type in TED Talk and cymatics, you'll come to the actual company that I'm talking about that I worked with. They're the ones that imaged my guitar that created the 432. By the way, they said, we've used this technology to image everything known to mankind. You'll find out in the TED Talk with MIT that they've used it to start a dolphin language. Do we have a link for that TED Talk for the website, for the other side of midnight? I can send it to you, but it is on.
Please send it to Cynthia, because we'll put that up. Now, do you happen to know offhand the largest cymatic phenomenon going on currently in the entire solar system, which is exactly attuned with this physics? You remember where it is?
No, lay it on me.
The North Pole of Saturn.
Ah, yes.
The hexagon around the North Pole of Saturn is totally HD torsion field cymatic physics. It's a resonance in Saturn, because Saturn is kind of like the teaching planet where this physics becomes very manifest. Saturn is the only planet in the solar system where the magnetic field is exactly aligned with the rotational axis of the planet, the spinning axis, which in normal physics is impossible.
It's mind-blowing to me, because when you really start to see, when we're talking about this creation being created from the 432 frequency, it's not like pie in the sky. This is real.
No, it's real reproducible physics. So let's get into the 432, because I want to get to the crop circles and some of these encoded messages, because they're crucial for the evolution of humankind.
Well, here's what happened is I created a whole 7-disc set of these discs with every note of the musical scale tuned properly, but with the right cymatic image. But right before I created that, because that Inky Ia that showed up was encoded and it became so important to me, I created one of these crystal discs.
No, wait. We were leaping ahead again. You asked for a crop circle. You spent 2 years looking at frequencies, particularly 432, which is item number 7 in your list in Radio with Pictures. And the crop circle we're talking about is number 2, which appeared June 4th of 2018. You say in your caption, Enki's 7-pointed star crop circle, the revealing of the divine arc of the covenant, signed Michael Lee Hill.
Right. That is an Enki crop circle. What happened is a 7-pointed star showed up in 2011 that encoded the name Ea Enki. And that's the one in 2011, I had just made a disc out of it because it was important. I had just then made my 7-disc set of the cymatic images. When I made the A note, I'm looking at a perfect 7-pointed star in the cymatic image. 2 and 2 hadn't clicked. I was like, why does this look so familiar to me? And it took me about 10 minutes and nothing came. I thought, well, I'm just going to have to let it go. Then I put it down and I looked over at the Enki crop circle, 7-pointed star, and tears flowed. I seen the 7-pointed star and I went, oh my God, it's encoded. It's not only is it encoded Ea Enki, it's encoded with something that will lead you in 432 based mathematics, because what you find out is 4 octaves below 432, 27 hertz creates through one of these scientific cymatic devices a perfect 7-pointed star. And yes, and the world map of Babylon that sits in a museum.
And you know why 27 is important?
Yes.
All right, you tell me what you know and I'll tell you what I know.
Well, first of all, the 7-pointed star, what happened was that was them encoding it with something only I would be able to decode. I found out that prior to 2011 and 2010 in the same field was a crop circle that was encoded E equals MC squared. And then, what they revealed to me is that we know that everything is both particle and wave, right? Quantum physics. Mm-hmm. That's just the particle part of the equation. Mass, it's right there. E is energy, M is mass, C is the speed of light squared. But when you find out 432 squared becomes C, the speed of light within 1% accuracy, 432 based mathematics is the only frequencies that are truly components of light. Meaning when you run the equation backwards, 432 based frequencies squared becomes C squared times mass equals energy. So this led me to these 2 crop circles are probably the biggest communication that they've given us, because it shows you both sides of the equation. One's a 7 point.
Let's go back. Who's doing crop circles? Because I got into this when my friend Keith Morgan, who's one of our techie guys, he's listening on the stream tonight. He's doing the background technology. He was with ABC News and he went to England, and I asked him, I said, Keith, get me some data on the crop circles, which he did. And that's when I figured out that the numbers in some of these crop circles that he got measurements for is exactly part of the hyperdimensional torsion field physics. So that was my entry point. How did you get into crop circles and how did you figure out who's making them?
Well, it started just because in the past I was fascinated with the subject, watched a few documentaries. It wasn't until crop circles became a method of communication between them and I that the real learning started. When I asked them to encode Ea Enki into a crop circle, they encoded it with a 7-pointed star, which is created from 4 octaves below 432. Then I seen how that relates to E equals MC squared. But now between that time and this, you're talking about June 4th, the crop circle that showed up, I had a really hard time being able to communicate this subject matter of why cymatics, the 7-pointed star, and these crop circles was so important. I was failing. And that night on June 4th, I finally created a disc out of that 7-pointed star, and I took a picture of it. Then I put the Enki crop circle under it, and I wrote on there, somebody's trying to tell us something. Well, I told my fiance that night, I said, you know what? I think I've finally done it. I figured out a way to communicate very simply, because picture says 1,000 words, and I was having a hard time. I felt like this was it. And it was all about the 7-pointed star. That day when I posted that meme is when the 7-pointed star showed up And that star, by the way, is encoded, the one that I was telling you, has 13 Mayan calendar Baktuns around that 7-pointed star. So I took that as a serious confirmation. But then what happened was, one night, this voice kept saying, you need to get up and you need to take a circle and divide it by 7. And so I learned to listen to that. I get up and I divide a circle by 7. It's 51.428. So I'm thinking, well, okay, why is that significant? And I decided, well, I'm going to look into why is that number significant. First, I found out it's the slope of the pyramid. Some people have it at 51.5 to 51.8. But what people now know is that pyramid's actually 8-sided. You only see the 8 sides on 2 days, the spring and the fall equinox.
We're talking the Great Pyramid in Egypt now.
Yes. So think about the engineering there. People don't even know that on one day of the year, you can see it has 8 sides. That means there's a hidden arc, and it is a perfect 51.428. Then I found out all of a sudden, all these crop circles that are showing up in Wiltshire, Avebury, through the Stonehenge. Look at the parallel on the planet. It's 51.428. 51.428 is forever tied to the 7-pointed star, because when you go from one point of the star to the next, it's exactly 51.428. Now, along Earth's actual latitude line of 51.428, probably they're saying this is an important line to how energy works. And when they put these crop circles along this line, it's working with the Earth's hyperdimensional energy systems. But what happened was, so then I started, like, they guided me in my mind to take that first arc, right? From the one point of the star, 1/7 around, and in my mind, just to highlight that in red or whatever color you want, and then let the rest of the circle fall away. So now you have this one arc that is specifically 1/7 around the way of a circle. And I thought, wow, I wonder what it would look like if you mirrored that arc with itself, meaning flip one over so it would form an eye shape, if you follow what I'm saying. Mm-hmm. And I thought, wow, I wonder what that shape, because I started to understand, they told me this is the true Ark of the Covenant. This leads mankind into 432 and understanding, and that this is truly it. So then the next learning phase was, okay, take the Ark, mirror it with itself. Now, what does a 7-pointed star look like that would include that Ark? Do you know the next day it showed up for real in a crop circle? That's what's in that crop circle.
Is that number 6?
Let me look. Probably. You can see in the middle, it's all arcs. So you got 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, the very bottom one. You can see in the inside, there's faint lines, and you can see half of an arc.
Yep, of course.
What you find out, if you can just continue these arcs and draw it out, I've done it. Horse Art Drew, too, actually released a picture of this with the arcs completed. And what I was instantly shown is, okay, first of all, you take a circle and you divide it by 7, you get 51.428. But if you take a circle and divide it by 7, you get the beginning of the flower of life. They call it the seed of life, or the origin of life. And this is how actual cells form. It's like a blueprint for physical creation down to an atomic level is the seed of life. The seed of life is created by 7 circles. So instead of dividing by 7, you multiply by 7. Take the first disc, lay it in the middle, and then 6 go around the outer edge, and it creates this seed of life, 5-pointed petal in the middle. And the interesting thing is that it's all created by nothing but 7 circles, and it's called Vesica Pisces when you take 2 circles and it creates the arc in between them. So this is the blueprint for our physical creation right now. If you look at this, and especially that crop circle that showed up, and this is because I asked them, I said, I want to see a 7-pointed star crop circle. In my mind, I already knew, man, this is important. What this is another, if you take those same 7 circles, and instead of putting one in the middle, you put them all around the outer edge. So this middle is now empty. You get this. You get this 7-pointed star. Now, mind you, all other 7-pointed stars up until now are straight lines. this is all female. It's an actual 7-pointed star created by nothing but curves, and they're vesica Pisces. This is showing mankind the next seed of life. It's kind of mind-blowing, you know, because we can't even think of a reality where cells will take on, in every phase of evolution, there'll be a 7-pointed star configuration instead of a 5-pointed star, because the pieces are being rearranged. That's
so
what this is pointing towards.
Let's go back to the transmutation of this knowledge base into the technology, the healing disc. Mm-hmm. What does the disc do?
What's really crazy is the image itself seems to contain a lot of subtle energy. Some of it I didn't even know. I was just guided to do this. What happened was,
and this is seen in item number 7 in your list.
Yeah, they're
gorgeous. They're absolutely they're works of art. My God, look at that.
It's mind blowing. What happened was I hired those scientists from Simoscope, you know, the leaders in this technology. I hired them to image my electric rock guitar. I was meticulous making sure it was tuned properly. And I sent them a 20-second sound file it was funny because they got back to me and they said, oh my God, we've never seen this complexity of anything we've ever imaged. They said, we've used it to image everything, every frequency known to mankind. We've never seen this kind of complexity or dimensionality. And with the toroidal physics in the middle, the Fibonacci, then all the platonic solids. But really what will toast your noodle, you can't really see this real well, but around the outer edge of this cymatic image is binary code. How the heck is there binary code? This is held in place by my guitar going bow, bow, bow. You know what I mean? So they contact me and they said, we don't know why this has produced this image. The head scientist, he said, we think it's because of we've never imaged an electric rock guitar amp before. Isn't that funny? Oh. He said, guitar amps are really the only thing that still uses old vacuum tube technology. That's how you get that Jimi Hendrixy, creamy, crunchy sound.
Analog.
Yes.
All frequency. It's not digital, it's frequency. Andrew Curry, who's one of our imaging team members, obviously has a really important question because he's interrupted his nighttime life. He has a life to actually tune in, and he's on the air. Andrew, what do you want to ask Michael?
Michael, first of all, thank you so much for coming on Richard's show. You've been just wonderful, man.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, man. Hey, listen, years and years ago, I had a friend of mine, we used to lifeguard together. He was also a rock star. And I did an album cover for him, and it was based on the name of one of his top track on the album. It was called Red Earth. And I remember doing this album. Yeah, I remember doing this album
Red
cover.
Earth. Wow.
Yeah.
What a surprise.
Yeah. And I guess my question for you is, you have an amazing amount of information coming into you. You are such a channel for such you're like a highway, dude. And I just wondering, where is this coming from? One of our models is one of the interstitial spaces, one of the places between where a deeper sense of humanity has come from is Mars. And and the reason why I bring up the album that I did is I did this cover art for him called Red Earth. And it's only now, listening to you tonight that it just sort of rang my chimes for, I think we were talking about Mars at the time. And I'm just wondering for you, where did this come from? Like, where do you think this is coming from for you? This information. I mean, it's unbelievable what you're saying. And there's so much detail. And again, 19.5, everybody, you got to go back and listen again. And I do too. But for you, Michael, where do you think this is channeling from?
What you would call the Anunnaki, they've proven it to me to the point that there's like an open form of communication, and the way that they're teaching me is through crop circles. And it seems to be like an intuitive thing where like me asking, I would really like to see this Ark of the Covenant mirrored with itself. And for some reason, I need to see that as a 7-pointed star. The next day it showed up for real in that crop circle right above the cymatic image. And I've met the Anunnaki, like I've said now many times, face to face, and within the Nephilim, Native American, Indian, Holy Grail, Sangreal bloodline. And I'm talking, imagine never even knowing you had Native American history History. It was because of the History Channel that they said if you can contact your adoptive parents, you should. So that's when I find out I have Native American Indian blood. So I asked, like, I thought, wouldn't it be cool to meet the chiefs and the elders and the grandmothers and learn what they know? Then again, my next thought is like, well, how the heck could that ever happen? You know? Well, that's when I met Chief Golden Light Eagle, and he walked up to me and he said, Michael, I need the Nephilim ambassadors at my Star Knowledge conferences. I need your energy there. Will you come and speak? And I was like, whoa, you know? Sure. So the next thing I know, I'm roommates with Clifford Mahudi, you know, the Zuni elder. I've met Mazatan, the Mayan calendar, all these chiefs of all these different, I've got to spend time with them now, and I feel so blessed. But this is the bloodline here, and they know they're Anunnaki. It's funny, it's not any question to them. That's what, like, for a long time, they couldn't reveal this to humanity because they'd be killed, you know? It's that simple. And they know, they're like, Chief Golden Light Eagle comes up to me, goes, oh, so you're Iroquois, you're one of those Great Lakes tribes. He goes, oh, you're one of those Atlanteans. That's heavy duty. And then grandmother Janice Mickle, she's one of the head grandmothers of the tribes. She comes to me and she says, we're so happy you're revealing the truth of who the mound builders are, because in 5,000 years of written history and 10,000 years of oral history, we know the mound builders are the Atlanteans. So it's like, we're the last to know, including myself, you know? So to me, it's no question where this intelligence is coming from. They don't consider themselves gods, though, and never did. They kept telling me, a matter of fact, the acorn is no less significant than the giant oak. It will one day become in the Creator's eyes. That everything, no matter what level of this life chessboard you're on, you know, a ninth grader doesn't go back to a seventh grader and go, nah, you know, I'm better than you are. They know.
Michael,
well,
sorry.
we have, you know, sorry to interrupt, guys. We only have 4 minutes left. I don't know how much of the show you heard, but, you know, we were talking about bloodlines and relatedness and family last night.
Yeah.
We're talking to family.
Yeah.
That's who was walking among us, and the nodal point in the physics, i.e. the precessional cycle, crossed the boundary in 2016, as I've been saying. And we're now on the other side, and we're imprinting the next cycle. And we've got to get our act together quickly, because there's other forces out there that want to distract us back down the dark tunnel.
Yeah. Michael,
it's not happening.
Yeah, dude, you're painting in such an artistry here. Like Richard said, you know, you said grandmother like at least twice in this interview.
You noticed that? Yeah,
and it honestly, man, it's like that is the feminine that's coming in. And you also mentioned Carmen Bolter, who speaks so highly of this concept. And I think you're right. There is a sensitivity coming in. You know, a man becomes better when he accepts his feminine side, when it's a deeper understanding that touches more. And yeah, and it comes through the music, comes through the art, it comes through the study, and you are doing it. And it's so beautiful that you've come on this show. And like I said, all I can say is like a paintbrush that you've painted it in. Anyways, it's just
Thank you, brother.
Yeah.
Let me fill one thing in. Like when we're talking about the grandmothers of this Nephilim bloodline, this one at the Sundance, this grandmother pulls up and she goes, I want to take you for a ride in my minivan. You want to go? I'm like, well, all right, sure. I get in. She goes, I want to teach you about the bloodline coming into the North American continent and how we became eventually the Lakota, Dakota, and Nakota of the Sioux tribes. So she goes, it'd be really helpful if I had a map of the United States to use to demonstrate this for you. And she looks at me and she takes her hand and waves it over the inside of her windshield of her minivan, and an honest to God map of the United States looked like from Star Wars showed up on the inside of her minivan. And
on that note, guys, we're out of time. So I got to have you and Grant back. We'll have Andrew with us and the rest of the gang. Hey, until next week, everybody, other side of midnight. Same time, same bat channel, next Saturday night. It'll be in the midst of the anniversary.